Okay. Good morning, all. Lovely to see you all getting on so well, but we do need to crack on if that's right. Welcome to all attendees. This is the Environment and Housing Scrutiny Board. A particularly warm welcome to our guests today, who we'll be hearing about in a minute. My name's Ed Carlisle. I am chairing today's meeting. Can I remind attendees that the meeting is webcast, so we have the world watching. And the link, there's people will be watching live. There'll also be an archive on the webpage. For the benefit of any members of the public watching the webcast, members of the Scrutiny Board will now be invited to introduce themselves first, and then we'll do officers and guests after that. So just starting here, Councillor Alley.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Shafali from Beeston and Holbeck Ward.
Hello, Councillor Kate Haig, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Andy Parnham and I'm a councillor in Armley Ward.
Good morning, Eleanor Thompson, councillor in Guiseley Broad.
Good morning, everyone. It's Javed Akhtar, councillor for London and Woodhouse Ward.
Good morning, Diane Chapman, councillor in Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Dawn Seary, Pudsey Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Lee Farmer, Adel and Wharfdale.
Richard Barker, councillor Temple Newton.
Good morning, everyone. Eden Hills, London and Woodhouse Ward.
Great. So yeah, if Becky can now introduce herself, and just a reminder, and Councillor Barker did this deliberately so that we could all just see it firsthand. Just the importance of turning your microphone back off when you finish speaking. So Becky, and then starting with John.
Hi, Becky Atherton, Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Good morning, John Woolmer. I'm the Chief Officer for Environmental Services.
Excellent.
Good morning, Tammy Tope Adamosu, Director of Communities, Environment, Housing and Health.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Culver, Deputy Chief Officer of Environmental Services.
Good morning, everyone. Hayley Thackeray, Head of Service, Environmental Services.
Good morning, everyone. Amy Dickinson, Service Manager for Environmental Enforcement.
Good morning, Philip Turpin. I manage data and performance for Environmental Services.
Good morning, Nick Lawrence, Business Manager for Environmental Services.
Morning, Ed Walton, Procurement and Contract Management for Waste Management.
Morning, Declan Norcliffe, Operations Director for HB Martin Waste.
And finally, good morning, Henry Irving. I'm a lecturer in history at Leeds Beckett University.
Right, thank you so much to you all. So I'm just going to ask Becky to run through agenda items 1 to 5.
Item 1, appeals. We've got no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents today. Item 2, we've got no items excluded from the public domain. Item 3, we've got no late items of business. Item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with the Council's Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as none. Item 5, apologies. We've had no apologies today, Chair.
Good, and just next item, just wanted to check the minutes from the last month's meeting have been circulated. Could I just ask whether these are an accurate record of the last meeting? Yeah. Great, so Councillor Parnham to propose them, Councillor Thompson as seconder. But also just there was one matter arising from that. So following our discussion last month, there will be a there's been a meeting scheduled for the 7th of September at 11 a.m. An invite has gone to all members about the localities model. So yeah, have we officially agreed? Yeah, they are a correct record. Great, so we're just going to move on. So this now, just looking briefly at the work programme. So we as a Scrutiny Board have an evolving and dynamic work programme for the year. So each meeting, there's an invitation for members to consider that programme and kind of propose new things for that, and then Becky can add them in and we can get ourselves organised accordingly. So just, an invitation to all members to input into that. Councillor Haigh.
Thanks, Chair. It's not about the work programme per se, but I think what we can see, and having experienced a number of scrutiny meetings over the last couple of years here, that the layout of this does not allow everybody who is on the scrutiny board to see witnesses and people giving reports very clearly. And I'm wondering if there's a better approach, such as the one that Parliament uses for select committees, where we sit in a horseshoe and witnesses are called forward to give their evidence and everybody can see them eye to eye rather than having to rely on the screens.
Thank you. Sounds reasonable. We will yeah, great. Any other members for the work programme? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we have an item to review the food waste trial in Wetherby, or the outcome of that, and where we're going next with it, if that's possible.
Any more for any more? Councillor Parnham?
As a potential subject going forwards, could we possibly look at the idea of putting clothing as well into green bins? I've had a lot of issues with the existing orange bins that we see clothing banks around my ward in Armley. It's a real hot spot for fly tipping. So I've actually had to have some removed. It's been quite a lengthy process to get them removed, the bins, so to prevent fly tipping. So I just wondered whether we could do that in the green bin, potentially look at that going forwards.
So that might be something we can, of course, pick up today as a discussion, but hopefully we'll get a satisfactory response, but if not, it could go into the work programme. Any more for the work programme, any members? Oh, sorry, Councillor Akhtar.
It's only my second meeting, Chair, but it seems like we're going to get on really well. But just a couple of things. I would like to have some sort of program on graffiti. How do we really challenge graffiti future, especially in areas like the one I represent and my colleagues on the borders of Headingley and Hyde Park. Graffiti is becoming absolutely a nightmare. We have discussed this 4 years ago on this platform, and I think we need to have some sort of a serious discussion, because it's affecting the health and well-being of our local residents. And when they leave their houses and they see absolutely a messed up street with the graffiti, and especially, and I've said this over the years, I mean, Hyde Park, Headingley ward represents a international community. When people have students from all over the world, and when they start taking pictures of themselves, and on the background there's a graffiti, what sort of message are we sending to the world? And I think that's something that we need to take it seriously. And second thing is to do with the flying tipping, and that's something that perhaps we can discuss at this meetings. But however, I feel we need to have a general sort of approach where there are hotspot areas in our city with regards to the flying tipping, and it's costing us as a local authority lots and lots of money. If we can have like a CCTV cameras which could be shared across the city wherever the hotspot areas are on a temporary basis, and bring those people to the justice who are causing these sort of problems, that probably will help to reduce our costs, and also will be better for our communities that we all are proud to represent.
Thank you so much, Councillor. Fly tipping is in the work programme, and it's something that I'm sure we'll all have plenty to talk about. I'm personally really interested in street art, so as in making the streetscape nice, because I agree, the tagging, the scruffy graffiti can really bring a community down. So it'd be interesting maybe to have a conversation later in the year about, I I think it's probably within the scope of our scrutiny board is to perhaps, what it would look like to really try to flip this challenge, and it is a real challenge with tagging, and actually how we can make the streetscape in our communities actually really attractive. Yes, Councillor Akhtar.
I mean, it's about 4 years ago since I've been on the scrutiny board, but the last discussion when myself and Councillor Hanan raised this issue at the scrutiny board, and it was declined by the West Yorkshire Police. That wasn't one of their top priority, if I remember correctly. And I think we need to bring this back again on the agenda, and without the help and assistance of our local policing team, we might not be able to achieve our goals. It's all right to clean the graffiti, but on the following day it's back to square one. About 10 years ago, when we managed to got the Brunel Grove all cleaned up, and the week after it was back to square one again. So it's costing us a lot of money, but we need to bring those people to the justice, and those who are causing. And you're absolutely right. We need to reclaim our streets back for the safety reasons.
Yeah, I mean, without preempting that conversation, some of the cities in South America in particular there was a lot of research around the impact of streetscapes on just the well-being of people. So basically, if you walk down Scruffy Street every day, as opposed to if you walk down a nice street or an attractive street, and some of those cities have gone very big on street art. And again, there's lots of research to suggest it makes everyone predictably much happier. So that's something we could look at. Any more from members? Great. Obviously, all our colleagues from across the council are watching avidly as well, and I suppose the invitation would be to any of our members in our groups, but also citizens anywhere from across the city, to get in contact and propose kind of key issues that we as a scrutiny board should be looking at. So, thank you. So, moving on to the...
Can I just note, Councillor Gibson's just sent his apologies. He's got apologies.
Right, sorry, there is apologies. We just need to send our best wishes to Councillor Gibson, who is sick today, and he's the Executive Councillor for Environment. James, Councillor Gibson, is very dedicated, so I'm sure he wouldn't be here. He wouldn't be here without good reason. So yes, moving on to the main section. We are now due to receive a presentation from the Director of Communities, Environment, Housing and Health about opportunities and challenges to the environmental services over the coming year. We've got several officers with us today who lead various operations within the service, and they will assist us in responding to our questions. Thank you to you all once again for joining us. This is intended as very much an introductory presentation, an overview. It'll give us additional context for the following item, particularly about recycling. Can I ask members to be mindful of whether there are matters we may wish to examine in greater detail later in the year, and then we can either through the scrutiny board itself or through subgroups schedule kind of deeper work into those things. So could I just hand over to Dr. Adamosu and John to begin, and then we'll take members' questions and queries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think you've introduced it very well. So this is to provide a context and overview of the environmental services, all of the moving parts of the services that make it up, but also, as the presentation will show, just giving you a bit of the overview of the challenges that the services face, as well as the improvements that will be coming in the year ahead. Many of the introductory work items that people had requested, and today's later report as well, would all feed from this overview. So we're hoping that, again, this gives you more of an insight into the service and how it runs, and also provides the context to lots of the papers that will come from John and his service area. So I'll hand over to John, who's the Chief Officer. Thank you.
Thanks, Timmy Topic. I'm looking to share now, so I'm hoping. Right. Yep, let's slide. Right. Okay, let's begin. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to Scrutiny and make a presentation on the wide breadth of services that fall under environmental services. I'm hoping you'll find it informative and help you make decisions about what you'd like to look into in more details, as we kind of touched on already. I brought with me a number of staff, as you can see, that represent different parts of the service. They've introduced themselves already, so I don't need to do that again. But I think this is useful for us as well as a service. It's important that managers also come and meet with yourselves and understand how Scrutiny works and the kind of issues that you raise come up and the passion of which you talk about them. I'm hoping that you'll see a lot of the stuff that we present today and talk about will resonate with what you are seeing as the main issues for improvement, particularly. But let's see as we go on. So I'll crack on with the presentation. He says, where's that not going on? Okay, so environmental services is organised, through a number of different services in effect. So it's a plural as environmental services. So very quickly, we have start at the top and work around the clock. 8 household waste sites across the city that are open 7 days a week, all year round. We haven't reduced those opening hours as a lot of other councils have done in the last few years due to financial pressures. But that's where people obviously can take the sort of items that won't fit in the black bin, the green bin, the sort of stuff that you'd otherwise be collected from the curbside. Very popular, accessed and used by many residents throughout the year and run very, we think, quite successfully. But they also are a place where we can put specific recycling facilities as well. So you might find there's paper banks there, bottle banks still at some of the waste sites. What we call the electrical goods can be taken there. And then we separate whatever we can out from general waste and into the different skips, such as wood is a good example. We also host at those waste sites places that we can capture items that can be reused, in particular paint that Seagulls Paint come and collect from all the waste sites, and unwanted items that Revive come and collect and then sell on in their 3 shops across the city, including 2 household waste sites themselves at Kirkstall and Seacroft. We have a city centre cleansing team. There's been hard at work, particularly this weekend, for example, supporting the Pride event in Leeds. But as you can imagine, throughout the year, there are a number of regular annual events that they support, but also ad hoc events, such as World Cup viewing and Leeds United celebrations, for example. But their day-to-day work, 7 days a week, is to support the city centre economy and the increased amount of people living in the city centre, which is changing the dynamic as well for them. But a key factor for them is also making Leeds a city centre a place that we're proud of and that visitors coming to the city can see is a clean place in which to visit. We have an environmental enforcement team that Amy introduced herself that manages, that we're just setting up at the moment. And we're developing a waste crime team for that team, and we'll talk about that perhaps a little bit further in the presentation. We have a clean neighbourhoods team that's staff across the city in different teams, zonally based across the city, organised around 3 areas of the city, east, south and west. They're mainly there to do with kind of traditional street cleansing type operations, such as sweeping, litter picking, emptying litter bins, removing fly tips, but also the moment do other stuff like deliver the bulky item collection service and deal with things like ginnels and potentially things like overgrown vegetation if they're on council land. Last but not least, we have the refuse service, which is the household collection service, curbside collection service, and in Leeds, as we know, we have the black, green and brown bins. We also deliver small medi-waste service across the city. And in the centre of all that, which Phil and Ed are part of, and Nick, is the Waste Contracts Performance and Strategy team that helps with all those issues in terms of managing the variety of complex contracts that we have to manage all the waste that all those other 5, whatever they are, squash circles deliver. So whether that's managing the green, brown and black bin waste, or the waste we've collected in the litter bins, the fly-tipped waste we've collected, all those sort of materials have to be taken somewhere and processed, ideally recycled as much as possible. But they need robust contracts in place, and that team does a particularly good job around that. So what's the prime purpose of environmental services? So it's to provide accessible, responsible, legal ways for residents and visitors to the city to dispose of their waste, from the curbside, household waste sites that we talked about, bulky item collections, bring banks, and in litter bins. They're the main ways in which people will dispose of their waste, which we need to service. However, as we know, and has been mentioned already, not everybody disposes of their waste responsibly and legally, so we also need to deal with that, whether that's on the roads, paths and wider public realm. Usually that's through things that have been fly-tipped or littered. As I've mentioned, we also deliver a variety of other cleansing functions that aren't household waste related. We sweep paths, we move detritus such as leaves. That's a big job for us that time of the year in the autumn time across certain parts of the city to make paths in particular safe. We deal with a variety of issues causing obstructions to paths, for example, overgrown hedges, and we remove graffiti from the highway, street furniture, public realm. So moving on to the challenges that we currently are facing now and in the next year or two. These are the biggies that are more nationally driven, so and are delivered through changes in legislation primarily. Simpler recycling is sort of in progress, and we're about to receive after this presentation a second update report, which covers the dry recycling in Leeds, the green bin. And you'll hear from that how we're therefore fully compliant in terms of the dry recycling requirements. But as been mentioned, perhaps an update later in the year would be good for the trial we're doing at the moment. We need a solution for food waste collection to make us fully compliant for the whole of the legislation. We have a deposit return. Well, there's a national deposit return scheme that's still being talked about being launched from October 2027. If that happens from that day, it will have a significant positive effect in reducing littering. It will mean that all plastic and metal drinks, cans and bottles will have a value, a bit like the old 2p a pop days of the bottles. There's a figure of around 20p being talked about nationally, so you can see it's a reasonable amount. It's not that'll have enough value for people to make a difference. So instantly, all plastic and metal drinks, cans and bottles will have a 20p value, or whatever it will be. So you can imagine that it will pretty much, we believe, not completely eradicate, but it will reduce dramatically littering those materials. And if they are littered, someone will go along, pick it up and take it and get their 20p. But it will have an effect also on what we collect in our wheelie bins as well, and what we take to be recycled through H.W. Martin's. There's something called an emissions trading scheme that the government is working on at the moment, and basically they are looking from 2028, although we feel that that's more likely to be 2030 now, that the music seems to be saying more like 2030. What that effectively is a tax on incineration, mainly around plastics, but other things that cause particular emissions. And that will have a huge effect on councils such as Leeds that use incineration as a way of disposing of the waste as opposed to landfill. So we're working on that at the moment and understanding the implications of that, both financially, but also what we can do between now and probably 2030 to further reduce those items getting in the black bins in the first place and therefore being incinerated. So that's something that's on our radar. And finally, one of the other big things is National Waste Crime Action Plan that's just been announced by government, including reforms to carriers, brokers, dealers, digital waste tracking, waste permit exemptions, and announced last week was an increase in the amount that we can fine people through fixed penalty notice flight, for example, to £5,000. So there's stuff happening that we are, as other councils are, following with interest and then responding to. So they're kind of the big national things. So just moving on to the things that I thought would be useful to share with you in the spirit of scrutiny, what we think we do well. Some of you might touch at some of these and say, well, not always, John. And then I'll come on to the next slide, is the things that we kind of festered up that we don't think we do so well and that we need to improve on. So just some of the big headlines, really. We do deliver a 6-day-a-week refuse service. We do empty £500,000 bins, every week across Leeds. That is an achievement. I think, we're proud of that. We do, in part of that, deliver the largest garden waste collection service in the whole of the United Kingdom. Due to how we do collect the waste and how we dispose of it through the contracts, less than 0.1% of all the waste we manage ends up in landfill. So that's everything that was in all of those circles or squash circles in the first slide, whether it's fly tipping, litter bins, whatever it might be, less than 0.1% collectively goes to landfill, and that's the best performing core city in the United Kingdom. We do deliver a 3-bin service, including the green bin, which we'll talk about more in the next presentation. And it does accept the full range of materials set out in legislation. In fact, we're ahead of the game with plastic films, but the government's just put back another year for the requirement, but we're actually doing that largely across Leeds. So again, that 3-bin service is around the convenience as well, trying to keep to a minimum the number of bins that are having to be put out and left on the streets. And that's something we do still aspire to deliver. We've serviced 5,000 litter bins across the city through our Clean Neighbourhoods team, an increase by 20% recently with the extra 5%, the extra 1,000 bins that we recently installed. And we believe, remove fly tipping promptly, usually. And again, there always are exceptions, but we think we're good at doing that. We operate 8 household waste sites, I mentioned, across Leeds, 7 days a week all year round. Again, there's been a lot of other councils that managed to maintain that. We think that we're pretty good at doing that. The household waste sites are reliable, they're very rarely shut. That said, we did have to shut one very rarely yesterday and this morning due to a breakdown of the compactor, which caused safety issues. So I couldn't believe that when that happened, and I was come here to say, well, we never shut. But we very, very rarely shut those sites, and I think they're seen as people as reliable places to go. We do keep the city centre clean, we believe, and support the nighttime economy, and we do respond positively to the really challenging events in a major city like Leeds and the changing of the city centre moving towards more living. And our serious environmental crime team, I think, has been well received across the spectrum as a way to successfully tackle the fly tipping that are more linked to organised crime. And I'm sure we'll talk about other forms of fly tipping as we go along, but certainly the more organised crime, higher level stuff, we're certainly seeing there's a bit of a groundbreaker in that. On to things that I don't think we do so well and that we need to improve on, and we're looking at improving on this year through our improvement plans, and quite happy to come back to scrutiny on these at a later date, perhaps to say what progress we've made on these things and for you to pass your judgment on that, really. We want to have less missed bins on the scheduled day collection. We still do miss bins. There are a number of reasons for that, primarily to do with obstructions through parked cars, making access difficulty. But that's not the only reason. And we think we can do better and should do better at that. We're still not as good as we could be in reporting to yourselves on the bins that have been missed that day in the end of day report that you all get, which causes frustration for us because we don't know what we don't know, and therefore we can't be going out recovering and making sure that we're doing something about those bins, and equally cause frustration for you and our customers, and doesn't help at all, and can create more contact as well. So that's something we recognise we need to improve further on. Less bins on pathways causing obstruction. That's again an ongoing source of frustration for people around the freedom of people to use pavements safely, and something we could improve more on. We can do better, and we'll talk about this again. And Henry's here, and we've got HW Martin here as well, Deck. So again, how could we recycle more through the green bins? It's great that everything can go in the green bin that needs to, but there's a lot of stuff that go in the black bin still that could be in the green bin. So let's do more on that. We recognise that we need to get more enforcement action. We're always reluctant to set targets around FPNs and such like, and fines, because we'd never want the public to think that we're driven by we have to do so many things to pay for our salaries, etc. It's a bit of a fine line to go down. That said, we do need to do more enforcement action that leads to FPNs and prosecutions. And that's one of the reasons that Amy is looking at establishing this waste crime team across the city, and I'll mention that later in the presentation. We do need to work closely with community committees. We've worked historically well with community committees, particularly through the Clean Neighbours team, and in days gone past an SLA with the community committees. But not only do we need to refresh that with Clean Neighbours team and enforcement, but look at how refuse as well works more closely with community committees and use that governance structure and yourselves as members at those places to work much better and closer with you. And finally, one of the things that I think have probably got a little bit worse at recently for one or two reasons, and we need to improve on, is better casework updates for elected members. Again, these across all of the environmental services, making sure that you're confident that the issues that you referred to as are actually being heard and listened to, and something's happening. And if it's not, why not? And then how we update you as the journey of that referral progresses. That's something we do need to improve on. So what's our servant development for the years? I'll try and speed up a bit here. So just getting into a little bit of the meat of some of the stuff we want to really prioritise in terms of service development. As part of the refuse service redesign, we will maximise the collection routes and manage the supervision coterminosity with community committees. So as part of that work, we'll make sure that we are putting in place management and team leader supervisory structures and routes themselves that are based around community committee areas. We think that'll help improve local election performance data of yourselves and accountabilities, but also crucially for us and hopefully yourselves, support that improved locality working and relationships with yourselves at that community committee and then potentially beneath that level. We will reorganise the Clean Neighbours team with an updated remit that prioritises keeping streets and public realms clean. I'll go on to do that to describe those obvious things that includes. That's really about saying, look, Clean Neighbours team needs a bit of a refresh around what is its job there to do, being clear about that, and about, we don't need to rename it, and there isn't one way it'll lead in the rename, because we actually need to do cleaner neighbourhoods. So again, resourcing it and supporting the staff so that the basic jobs of emptying litter bins, removing fly tipping, sweeping, graffiti removal, litter picking are the core part of what they do. But critically as well, formalise as well the work that does work well in lots of parts of the city around them supporting community action to do with those things. An obvious one is litter-free Leeds, but it's not exclusively litter-free Leeds. There are plenty of other organisations, active groups across the city that might not be part of litter-free Leeds that are doing lots to help keep the places clean. So how do we make that and resource that as part of what Clean Neighbours do, rather than just a thing that relies on a good relationship between a Clean Neighbours team person and those other people? To do that and create that focus in Clean Neighbours, we're looking at separating out the delivery of the bulky collection service and the maintenance of ginnels. We've been discussing with Civic Enterprise Leeds at the moment about them delivering those services as standalone, effectively internally contracted out services. The bulky collection in particular is a distraction to the Clean Neighbours team. So you probably, I don't know how many of you know this, but the bulky service is delivered by your local Clean Neighbours team. So one day a week they'll have to create a small team that go out and visit properties and take the bulky bookings away. And that takes that resource and time and effort away from doing all the other stuff they should be doing. And for us, there's no reason why that can't stand alone as a service. And that also then gives opportunity, potentially through Civic Enterprise Leeds, to improve that service as well. Look at potentially expanding it for more bookings and to make it even more reliable than it is. And finally, we've mentioned it already, but we'll restructure the Clean Neighbours team so it's fully coterminous with the new 8 community committees. And we're looking at a dedicated team leader for each community committee. So each community committee will have a named person that is responsible for the relationships and the delivery of the service in that community committee area. So, and that just gives an example of that. I'll share, obviously these slides will all be shared, so sorry that hasn't been done in advance. That's just evidencing what I've just said, really. It's the 8 community committee areas split into our 3 operational areas, and each of those will have their own Clean Neighbourhoods team and their own team leader that will service and work with yourselves. I wanted to do a bit of a focus on enforcement because I think that's a key issue. I should have said at the start, just to make clear to probably members that are new to the committee. Over the last 12 months, we have been to the committee. We've presented a paper and discussion and scrutiny on household waste sites. We've presented one on simple recycling, concentrating on food waste collection, and obviously we're doing the green bin, dry recycling after this item. So we've been to yourselves already 3 times this year covering those areas. And then at the performance meetings, we've covered at depth a lot of the refuse issues. So hence I thought it'd be useful to have a little bit of a sort of focus on enforcement here, because that's an area we've probably not touched at scrutiny. So just to give you an overview of that, and whether you want to look at more detail on that, obviously is up to yourselves. But just to make the point at the moment that the enforcement staff deal with a wide range of issues. It's not just fly tipping. So that yes, they deal with waste, and that obviously includes things like fly tipping, littering, waste in gardens, commercial waste. But they also deal with highways related stuff such as obstructions on the highway, and an obvious one is an overgrown hedge, but also things like advertising boards that might be causing obstructions. They deal with nuisance and antisocial behaviour such as odours causing a nuisance, light and smoke, I think, yep. And other issues such that perhaps in other councils environmental health might deal with. Give us a couple of examples of those, Amy. So things like pests in properties, filthy and verminous properties, kind of hoarders. You probably know that's the sort of thing that our team will deal with. You can imagine really resource-intensive bits of work for those people that are unfortunate to be in that position to help them. And housing-related issues such as drainage in empty properties, for example. So a wide range of things. I know we won't read all these out, but that just gives you a real sort of breadth and flavour of all the different pieces of legislation and acts that the team, for those wide variety of things I've talked about, can access and use. And part of the skill of their job is choosing the best one to use for each particular case. Sometimes it obviously works itself out. So just before I move on to that, so the reason I share those 2 slides is I wanted to sort of explain further why we feel it necessary to set a separate enforcement team up and separate out enforcement within that team. Amy's setting up a waste crime team, part of that, and then the other bits that are not the waste crime, so just creating a smaller team that will deal with those other issues like environmental health, housing, obstructions, such like. Is there anything you want to add, Amy, around that? Don't have to. Yeah. Okay. Conscious of time, so let's move on. As just finally, just wanted to talk to you briefly about some work that we're on with at the moment. And I know that there was an announcement in, I think, full council a while back around the development of this community pride sort of team approach. And so just to give you a flavour for what we've done so far and what we're expecting this to deliver, and how yourselves as members will be involved in this. And be able to shape and to a large extent determine what the teams do over the next 12 months or so. So we're looking at establishing a wider community pride team for Leeds, and we're going to test, learn and grow an approach that delivers, and this is the critical bit for you, I'm sure for you, neighbourhood action weeks. And these are largely going to be in places where additional day-to-day core environmental provision is perhaps less than other places. So there are lots of, there are a few wards across the city that have a more higher concentration of the resources that I've talked about, particularly Clean Neighbourhoods team and enforcement staff. But there are other wards across the city where you've got a more minimum core service, and you don't necessarily attract a lot of extra resources through the way that the council allocates its budget. So this is about creating a small team of around 9 operational staff, plus a couple of dedicated enforcement officers that will be able to move through the city on a ward-by-ward basis each week and spend a week concentrating in an area in each ward as it moves through. And I'll talk in a moment how that would happen, we think. And we will organise that through the community committees and through your committee governance structure to allow that structure to decide where that week-long period of activity would happen in each ward. So it'll be something that members will be able to make that inform and make that decision on. Initially, we're going to focus on getting the basics, get the team up and running, and focus. I'll come on to the next slide and talk about what they'll actually do. But as we grow that approach, we want that to be established as something that we can therefore do more planning ahead of that week and speak and talk to other services, potentially even outside of the council, like the police, whether it's the health sector, but certainly through our own public health. Obvious examples internally will be housing and social behaviour team. But how we can work together ahead of those weeks and get more out of that week than just going round. It's a good thing to go around tidying up, removing graffiti, replacing street signs, etc. So it's something we want to develop as we deliver this over the next 12 months. But we don't want that to stop cracking on. So let's crack on and get something in place. So these are the sorts of things that we'd expect that team of 9 to be able to do. So the kind of deep cleansing stuff of streets, graffiti removal, including private walls with permission, cutting back of vegetation, replacement of broken and poor condition litter bins. So we'll have a budget attached to this team. So when they go into an area within your ward, there'll be a small budget, so they'll be able to access to purchase new litter bins and, where necessary, broken, missing refuse bins. They can do things like sticker in the bins to improve recycling, less contamination. They can going to work with highways, particularly on this, look at broken, poor condition street signs, whether they can be either cleaned or ultimately replaced. Potentially look at a mobile household waste site provision, so maybe through a refuse lorry or two being in the area at the same time and people being able to take out things that are more bulky items, for example, in that week. And working with Polly's team in parks around some planting and level forestry type work in those areas, again, that same week. So just to summarise that because quite a big thing that I've just talked about. We're developing that at the moment. We're going to be coming back through yourselves through the community committee structure and talking about how we'll launch that. And we're looking at getting the DDR for that approved in the next few weeks, getting the team established in the next month or two, and hopefully be operational from around September and start doing that work in each of your wards, working with yourselves, like I say, to identify which bits of the wards you want that team to come and focus on. A key part of that will be gathering evidence, information from some of it will be output sort of driven. So tons of this, the amount of stuff we did this. Some will be about more anecdotally evidence around here's what it looked like before, here's what it looked like now. But critically, we want to work with yourselves and with local people around how they feel and engage with them before and after and during as well. So we're looking at developing that and the more news on that shortly to members. So our asks of Scrutiny Board, what's your feedback on the list that I said around what we need to do better? That's not exclusive. There are other things we accept, but that's kind of our kind of top list. How do you think we could improve recycling through the better use of green bins? What do you think we could do better or work with others to do better? How could we better link with community committees to improve outcomes? So things like recycling, less littering. How can we use the community committee structure and you as members on the community committee to do that, to improve recycling and to reduce littering? How can we work together on that? What else do you think could be done to reduce fly tipping? And how do you think we should work with members to deliver those neighbourhood action weeks? Like I say, we're looking to push that through the community committees to make sure ward members then have a say on exactly where we go. But again, any thoughts on that? That's it. That's my short presentation, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you, John.
I'll go back.
Do we need to turn this off now?
Yeah.
Just stop sharing, John.
Yeah.
I'll come to you, Councillor Hagan, in a minute. So yes, so thank you. Clearly there was a huge amount there, and we're not going to have time to go in depth into a lot of those issues now. But obviously I'd be keen to, or we'd be keen to hear members give initial feedback, Councillor Thompson, and potentially look to weave some of this into the work programme. But yeah, so I mean, the simpler recycling item was designed as the bigger item for this thing, but I'd be keen to give this perhaps at least up to half an hour, if that's right. So yeah, so we've got time because there's a lot. So anyway, so I'll come to Councillor Haigh first of all, and then all of you have got lots to say, which is great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a question relating to the Action Week and that team, and then also one that relates to an item on the report, which I've just mentioned at the end. The Action Week, I mean, I think we all, as members, know, you know, the benefits of engaging with community when we have these weeks. There were a couple of things. One was that you suggested, and I just want you to clarify, so this is for areas which are not already seeing a high incidence of cleaner neighbourhood team intervention, and how those areas would be selected. And you talked about stickering bins, so presumably that's with what you can and can't put in bins, etc. Do you think there's value or an opportunity to go a step further and actually directly engage with residents by actually talking to them about what they can and can't put in bins, rather than a sticker, which can be a bit, I don't know, passive aggressive, I guess, in terms of, you put a sticker on a bin, and it's not necessarily people who are creating the waste in the household who are the same people who are putting the bins in and out, and also just that creation of an understanding of what's appropriate in those bins. I think there's an opportunity as well to work with communities and activists in the community around those weeks and getting them involved as well. I think that would be really positive. So that's related to that one. And then just on the report, and in terms of brown bins, and I know this is the case in my ward, and I'm sure it's the case of many other wards, new estates don't have brown bins and don't have brown bin collections. It seems to me, I don't really understand the process whereby a developer can hand over waste collection on a new estate that doesn't involve the complete service, i.e. the developers aren't paid to provide those bins and that service on that estate. And is there some kind of failure in the planning process or the taking on of that service when we're costing, what we're asking developers to contribute, where we're just failing to pick up on that?
Thank you. I'm also conscious of not councillors. Dr. Adamosi also wants to come in, so between you, feel free to respond.
Thank you. I'll then hand over to John. Thank you, Councillor. I probably would suggest that we bring the community pride item as a fuller item to scrutiny. That was very much a whistle-stop tour that John brought, but exactly what Councillor has just explained in terms of resident engagement, working with volunteer communities, really building that civic pride. That really is the basis of the community pride work. So there's lots of layers to that community pride work, which I think will be really, it's quite exciting, really interested to bring it here and to talk about that further, as the points that you've raised are exactly the things that we are planning to address. So part of the team that John mentioned, we've got education officers there. There's more work that we really want to do, not just addressing symptoms, but actually talking, engaging with residents and really understanding what those challenges are and working together. John also mentioned a number of different services. So we want to really think about engendering pride in place, and that's the emphasis of the community pride, but understanding that we need to make an impact in people's visible neighbourhoods. So I really do think if we brought that back as a full item, we could really go into depth into what that work looks like. But it is an exciting piece of work that is for all wards. So the money that was ring-fenced in January or February full council was about providing an equitable resource that is for every ward. And John mentioned that there are some wards that miss out when we target and use that universal proportionalism, and this is in recognition of that, that we know that every resident wants to have pride in place, and this is a resource that we have for all wards. And the community committees will absolutely be integral to that, but absolutely so will residents and volunteer groups, and we definitely will bring that back to discuss.
It's Tommy Toppy. Just to add a couple of things there on one or two specifics of the question. So just to be clear in terms of where the resource would go within each ward, the point I was making was to say that some of the way Tommy Toppy's described it is also so that this resource is to be shared equally amongst wards. And therefore, because of that, you'll probably find the resource will be used in wards where they're not used to having this extra bit of help and support. What I wasn't saying, and apologies if I gave the impression, was that that means it can't go where there is already extra resource. That will be up to the ward members in those areas through the community committees to decide. You know, we will have a view on terms of where we think, and we might offer a view to say, look, within a particular ward, we think there are these issues and opportunities, and that we think if we did it in this part of the ward or this part of the ward, we could maybe hit the ground running because we've already got a good relationship with the housing manager or whatever it might be. But ultimately, the decision making will be through the community committee structure and the ward members. So there'll be no sort of, well, you can't spend it there because we've already got more resource there. That's not what I meant. Sorry if I gave that impression. In terms of the brown bins, so just to be clear on the brown bins, again, very briefly, actually we did cover this before, but the brown bin routes were last redesigned just as COVID hit us in 2020 with the new routes. And what we committed to at the time was a 5-year cycle of redoing the routes. And when we did the routes in 2020, we did talk to planning at the time about the housing developments that were due to come online in the next 2 to 3 years, knowing that in 5 years' time, we plan to redo all the routes again and go through that again. Because of the issues around wanting to move to putting food in the brown bins and our ambitions around that, we put off the route review for the brown bins that would have otherwise happened last year. Because we're still working on the issues around food in the brown bin, and there's a procurement process about to be taken around that, we recognise the fact, and there's many members, one sat to the right of me here, that making the point about those properties that are currently missing out, particularly new developments. So we're working on that at the moment to establish a dedicated what we call a new builds team crew for the city that for now will pick up those developments until we do the whole review in a year or so's time. So the short answer is we're working on it at the moment. We hope to get a team up and running by the end of summer that will be able to start collecting brown bins in those housing developments that are currently not receiving that service. And we'll keep members updated on that. We'll write to members shortly. All members, that is, as we usually do when we're looking at routes and reviews like this, we'll send you a list of the housing estates and properties that we think are in your wards that currently don't have a brown bin that should have. And I'll give you a very quick opportunity to comment on that. I'm sure you won't take properties off that list. I'm sure you might offer up some further properties that we might have missed on that. We'll get that done as quickly as possible, get the team established, get the brown bins ordered. We're looking at about 10,000 properties, I think, across the city. Get them delivered and get the service up and running in this year.
Just on this point. Now I welcome that, and I agree with yourself. Can you just, I mean, have I just missed a point here? What you're saying, the new routes will be next year. Is that for the new build properties or those properties that we have been campaigning for last few years? Those properties that we were promised that those properties will get a brown bin. Are we going on to the back burner again if this is the case?
Again, sorry if I wasn't clear enough. No, it's not just about the new builds. It's about all the properties that we believe that currently don't have a brown bin that are eligible for a brown bin. So yeah, including non-new builds that members feel actually those gardens are big enough. There'll have to be discussion around that, and obviously we need to make sure that they are big enough to support justify a fortnightly brown bin service. But it's all properties that currently don't receive a brown bin will have an opportunity.
So what happened to the discussion that we had over the last 3 or 4 years now, where the routes were set up and many, I mean, especially in my ward, where we identified these are the sites where those brown bins required, and now what you're saying is going to be another 12 months. Sorry, am I hearing correctly here?
Again, I apologise for not being clear enough. No, what I said was that we are at the moment establishing that crew, and we will write to you shortly within the next 2 weeks or so as members with a list of properties that we believe could be added to a crew that will establish and set up, get the brown bins ordered and start those routes and crews before the end of this summer.
That's noted.
Great, thank you. Just before coming on to Councillor Thompson, I did just, with regards to the community pride, and let's not go into more detail, I think I'd agree it needs its item on its own. I don't want to put all the pressure on you, Councillor Irving, but sorry, Councillor, Doctor, all these extra councillors we've got. I'm particularly struck. I mean, I think you're here particularly for the next section, and as I understand it, I think you're particularly interested in kind of social imagination and behaviour change. So I think this work with regards to building community pride, like we can fix all the administrative systems and the administration of bins and whatever to our heart's content, but actually there are huge gains to be made from giving some attention to behaviour and social change. So I'd look forward to your work. Yeah, I'm ready for you to be my best friend over the coming years as we develop this work. But anyway, we look forward to hearing more from you later. But anyway, more Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep my page of questions short and won't go through everything. So encouraging to hear that there'll be more work on enforcement. We have a particular issue, I suspect it's replicated elsewhere, of a skip operator that persistently places skips on the highway, doesn't obtain a permit, but charges the residents for the permit that they haven't obtained. And it's happening over and over again. We're also not sure where the waste's going, but they don't seem to be quite bad enough to get on the hit list. So it'd be good to see some more work on that kind of lower level waste issue. And around waste carriers, particularly for those of us on boundaries with other authorities, we have quite a lot of cross-border issues with waste carriers from Bradford, and they may have from some of ours. Really keen to understand more about behavioural change work. It's something our litter-free group have asked us to look at with our MP, to see how we change that littering and fly tipping behaviour. And having lived in Belgium more than 20 years ago, where they had deposit return schemes, where you paid less for your recycling bag than for your regular waste collection bag, and those financial incentives to recycle and how effective that was. Although then you get some disparities as well that come from that. And then really keen to hear about the neighbourhood action weeks. Got some ideas of where we could do that. Also be interesting to see, working through community committees where we have estates that cross ward boundaries, how we might be able to work on those. There's one particularly that comes to mind for our area. I'll park it there. Thank you.
Any response?
Just in response to community pride, then I'll hand over to John. But absolutely, if we bring this for an item here, we could definitely have a good discussion on that. And when we do bring it, exactly as you said, Chair, this is all based within like the Marmot levers for determinants of inequalities and improvement around health, understanding that environment is one of those social determinants and is one of those levers. And this is where we're talking about that community pride. So definitely welcome a discussion with yourself and with others on that. And when we bring it, it'll be definitely really helpful to hear your views and your thoughts. As part of what we know that we need to do is, as a service, we will not be coming in saying this is what we'll do, but absolutely working in partnership with ward councillors, but also importantly residents as well. Thank you.
Nothing particularly to add, Chair. Obviously, I know the comments been made, and obviously agree with them all. You know, in terms of the sort of things we should and to an extent do focus on, particularly around the cross-border issues with Bradford. And the Serious Environmental Crime Team has done a lot of work at the cross-border with Bradford colleagues on that, and we work with Bradford colleagues around waste contracts, for example. And we'll continue to do so. The skip operator is an interesting one, which we'll obviously pick up outside the meeting. But yeah, the change behaviour work, and that's a good point, an interesting point about when we get the neighbourhood action weeks. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, like almost inter-ward things. Yeah, but absolutely, there's no rules for this other than what we make up as we go along with it with yourselves. So you know, there's no rule that says you can't. So that'd be interesting to do, and I'd be very interested in doing that.
Thank you. Did you want to particularly contribute?
Yeah. I'll call them littering enforcement officers. I don't know if that's the real correct term, but they do seem to be around city centre. But could we have them in parks or occasionally? But more importantly, around high schools, and trying to stop the certain people of a certain age who think it's just easy to litter, and it just needs to sort of change the mindset slightly, that they just can't just suddenly drop litter. I'm sure it's not easy to enforce a sort of teenage fine, but at least give the impression that they're not allowed to drop litter quite as easily.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we always have a problem with that, and you summed it up at the end there, Councillor, around ultimately it's what can we do. So in reality, if we were to contract 3GS, so we currently contract to do the littering city centre, for example, to do that around schools, in reality, they're not really going to do it enforcement. It would be more about that messaging, wouldn't it, and trying to get it across. I would argue that's what the schools should do. Myself, I would argue that the schools should take responsibility for their children, and they should be the ones patrolling outside the schools, and they're in a better position to influence and know who's littering and change. But other than that, it's difficult to know what more we could do. We don't have the resources to be sending enforcement officers to schools, but that doesn't mean that if a particular school or particularly ward council members or community committee identify a particular school as a hotspot, we can't talk to them about what we could do around that. But we are limited in what we can do for that simple reason that they're not police. They're not police. They're litter enforcement officers. They need to have the power to not to arrest, but the power to issue. Ellie can build a technical.
Yeah, I'll come in on that. But we can't issue FPNs to under 18s, but what we can do is work more proactively, I guess, with schools on some sort of restorative justice that they could implement within their schools. So we could look at a package that could be delivered in a school, and then, example, like John said, the school then delivers that enforcement, and any pupils caught littering have to do an hour's litter picking detention or something like that. But yeah, we can't enforce on under 18s.
As I say, it was more about of sending a message, and even like I said, even if they were sort of right, you're going to get £200 fine, but we're going to waive that if you do that. So obviously, it's sort of slightly enforced, but I do see it quite often with high school kids, and it does happen. A real, for people who live round about, it's a real problem.
Thank you. Just wanted to jump in. There was just a quick discussion around the community pride work, which is a more place-based way of us working, gives us the opportunity exactly to do that, to partner with schools, to do the education, enforcement action, but really understanding what the key issues and challenges are at place in wards would help us to deliver a suite of interventions that could support, and that absolutely could be one of them in terms of partnering with schools and really building that education element.
Thank you. Councillor Akhtar, back to you.
Yeah, Chair, few questions and a comment if I'm I'm okay to say that. I mean, I quite welcome the report. There are some positive things that I have been highlighted, but one thing I disagree. One size not fit all, basically. 1 week action will not cater for all the wards. We all have different challenges in our neck of the wood. So especially in our neck of the wood, where we have HMOs, migrant communities, different cultures, and so on and so forth. And I think 1 week will not address some of the issues that we need assistance. Second point, I would like to welcome a contact person for each community committee. When will this happen, and how soon can we move on with the local approach? And third thing is that you just touched but not gone into details, having a dialogues with other departments, for example, housing and the local other agencies, especially when we talk about the council estates. The responsibility falls under the housing with regards to the cleansing and the cleanliness, but it'll be good if all of you talk to each other and address some of the issues. Some of those houses, which when they were built early in 60s or 70s, they're not designed to get the small vehicle into those little guinnels, little streets. So we need to approach, have some sort of approach where we can go into these estates and clean those areas. Some of those estates are absolutely in a state of tip. and that is because each department is not talking to another department. And third thing is to do with the grass cutting. I'm sure other colleagues will have same experience where a contractor has been given a map to cut the grass, and he will miss about 3 yards of that grass, that particular site, and then the residents will start getting in touch with the elected members, and then when elected member approaches the officers, oh yeah, this is not on our contract. So I think you need to start talking to housing more than anybody else to get to the bottom of this, because I mean, overgrown vegetation, for example, is another thing. So if we can all work together, and I think we can resolve some of the issues, because the budget housing is a very minimum, and I think your assistant might help them, and they probably can help you as well. So I think this is the bit you need to concentrate. But with regards to 1 week's action, it's not going to work in my ward.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll jump in then hand over to John. I think this is why it would be really important that we bring the entire programme here, because that is exactly what we're addressing. We know that simply just cleaning the areas will not effectively create change. So right now, every single service that's in my directorate is part of this community pride, and that is housing, that's public health, and that's the environmental services, parks and green spaces. We've gone across the councils, we've got active leads, highways, everyone is at the table to develop this community pride programme. We've gone beyond to GPs to understand their role in this. So this really is a cross-council, cross-city-wide community pride programme that I really will be keen on bringing here and talking through fully what that looks like, because a lot of the challenges that you've raised, Councillor, that is absolutely what we want to address. We know that these issues in terms of visible neighbourhood impact does not just sit with environmental services, and absolutely there's a requirement for so many services to come together on this, and that's why we have taken the time to really develop this, and we want to move, and we will show you in the slides, from a traditional just cleaning to absolutely this interplay and this partnership work that would address some of those issues. You've also mentioned 1 week isn't enough. We absolutely recognise that. And what we don't want to do is swoop in for a week, do some cleaning and then leave, because we know that things will return back to where they are. So there's absolutely an effort to make sure that this is sustainable. And that means that we're moving from the council just doing the work to doing the partnership. So with volunteer groups, with community groups, with residents, that's why we want to take the time before we're even present to develop that work with residents and with councillors to do the work. And we've said that that week is a bit of a catalyst of lots of change that would happen. And again, when we bring the entire programme to you, we will be able to show how we're addressing it, because we know that 1 week will not be enough to just swoop in and make the changes. So there absolutely is a sustainability element to this as well.
Oh, that's really encouraging. Thank you for that. And I really welcome. I mean, last year, John probably will remember. Now, as I said earlier on, one size fit, especially in my size. So if you can understand, the point I'm trying to make is this, that last year when we talked about the community committee delivery groups, and I'm sure other colleagues will have similar sort of situation, the issues that we've challenged in Headingley and Hyde Park and Little London and Woodhouse doesn't have the same impact in Chapel or Moortown, if you can understand the point I'm trying to make. Different world altogether. And the reason I asked for some sort of environment board to be set and have a reference for these two wards only, because they've got these are the two wards play a massive role in our city, where hundreds of thousands of students comes into the city. The city makes a lot of money because of the population. Student population comes from all over the world, and our community pick the pieces up. And this was the reason I wanted to create a environment group to target in these two wards, so we can go into the details and how we can work together with environment, housing, police, and University of Leeds. 5 universities in the same ward. Just imagine that. And our people are paying the price for it. So the point I'm trying to make is this, Chair. Let's work closely with those areas, hotspot wards, and trying to tackle the real issues. Every single ward is important, but every single ward has a different issue altogether. And that's the bit I'm I'm trying to put the message across. But I'm really, I really welcome your points, Doctor, and look forward to working with yourself and John and all of your team.
Thank you. No need to respond to this, because I think it can be part of the conversation. But I think just wanting to echo Councillor Akhtar, I think there's a really important conversation. So you're talking about different challenges in different wards. There's also just a level of challenge. So some wards, like my own as well, there are far more challenges. So I think there's a question around about equity. If we give equal resource to every ward, is that actually the fairest and best response for the city? But anyway, that can be part of the conversation as we have. Anyway, Councillor Chapman, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. Yeah, specifically, I wanted just to mention ginnel maintenance, because that's been an absolute nightmare in our ward this year, because it doesn't appear to be happening, and we've been out doing it ourselves sometimes. So moving it to CEL is one option, but I'm not convinced CEL will have the resources to do it properly. So I would like to see more about what the proposal is and how it's going to work, because I think you could link it into the grass cutting contract, which potentially, is it with highways? I don't know where the grass cutting contract sits, but that doesn't work either. So I think there's a wider subject there about how we maintain those sort of areas. And I just wanted to say I really welcome what you said about the mobile HWRC. We had a conversation pre this meeting about something very similar, a mobile skip service that I've seen in other councils, and it sounds as though it's pretty much the same sort of thing. So it's particularly for people who can't get to a recycling centre, because not everybody can. So I think that'd be really good when we get to that. And then, as we've been talking, I was remembering the littering. Some of you will be old enough to remember the Keep Britain Tidy campaign. When I was, yes, it may still be going, but do you remember it used to be on the telly, and there was the man running around dropping the litter and everyone chasing him and whatever it was? That's what I remember. So when I don't litter, and I remember that campaign even now, and it must be 50 years ago that campaign ran. It would have been back in the 70s, probably early 80s. So we're not going to do that on the telly anymore, because I'm not sure anybody actually watches adverts anymore. But there is social media and TikTok and whatever else it is that young people listen to. And I would say, actually, in my ward, I'm not sure it is the schools that's the problem. Our commercial street is awful. It's excellently cleaned up every single morning. So the teams do a really good job. We have tons of bins. People will only use the bin that's actually next to them. They won't walk 10 yards to the next one. So I don't know how we educate that. But I think social media, that's cheap and easy to do, isn't it? I would have thought a TikTok campaign, or whatever they call them. So that was just a comment, really.
Thank you. Councillor Hills.
Hello. I have a couple of questions and comments. First of all, the community pride team, I think this is a really great idea. 33 wards, though, means 33 weeks. It's going to mean essentially 1 week a year per ward. And I just think that's going to mean we're going to need a lot of advance notice, like for each ward, so that we can prep things in advance. We know exactly how we can assist as elected members, but also then to be able to put a call out to residents and see where the problem areas really are, because I'd be quite keen to have input from residents on that. So if that could happen, that would be amazing. Separate question about the more recycling in green bins and what can be done about that. I saw that Manchester recycles 39% and we're at 35%. That was on page 32 of the report. So has there been any work with other core cities and what they're doing better, what they're doing worse, where we can improve? I'm sure there probably has, but if it could just be brought to scrutiny, that'd be great. Waste reuse shops. This might not have been covered and it might be a separate issue, to environmental services, but there's 2 of them in Leeds. It was on the report. Is there any scope to open any new ones? Have they been successful? I thought there was 2,000 tonnes of refuse and reuse being done there, and obviously reuse is more important than recycling. So if we could see if there's any way to expand that programme, I think that would be really useful. I think I had another question, but I can't remember it right now. So if you want to deal with that.
Any quick fire? I'm conscious. I'm keen to move on, but any quick fire responses?
Thanks, Councillor. Just very quickly on the reuse, I absolutely 100% agree. You know, obviously, if we can get that recycling up the hierarchy and start with reuse, well, let's start with less waste in the first place, but get people reusing stuff. So we have 3 now, reuse sites. So we work with Revive, who work with other partner charities, and they opened one. Is it Hunslet, isn't it? Yep. Councillor, you were there at the opening. So in Hunslet, they opened a new one, which is the first one outside of the waste site. So we've got one at Kirkston Seacroft, and they're working with us at the moment on a proposal for a 4th. So we work with them primarily as our main partner, that we've got a relationship with them, and a proven successful partner. But like I said, we also work with other people like Seagulls, for example, on Leeds Wood Recycling. So we are working with other reuse organisations. I think there is an appetite certainly for how we could potentially bring all those together as well, and work much better together than at planning other facilities and how we do stuff. But yeah, so that is something that we're keen to support as much as we possibly can, yeah. And hopefully some news on that will come shortly.
And the other question was about community pride, and that can be part of the focused discussion. I mean, I think the Revive stores, I just want to say it's a really good story, because that was very much, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was rooted in conversations that regular citizens were having and saying, why don't we, I think it was people like ourselves going to the tip and seeing perfectly good things going to the tip, and then a conversation brewed in, and then officers from the council got involved, and it became this thing that is really pioneering and is starting to spread around the region now. So certainly all credits to Revive and also Seagulls and all the other innovators making good things happen. Yes.
I've remembered my 4th question. It was kind of partially to echo what Councillor Akhtar was saying about our ward, which is that a lot of the issues that happen are to do with housing, and obviously we need to bring those people in, and yes, it's going to be a bit of a partnership approach between different council areas, but a lot of the problems that we're seeing in our area are like contractual issues, and yeah, it's really great that we'll have a week to do that, but like the 9 officers that are coming to help out, it said there was a staff crew of 9. If there could be one person that is, you know, it's great to have a lot of people on the ground and doing the actual work, but if we could have one person that focus on like dealing with the problems with the contracts that are happening, because, you know, we have PFI, we have the contracts for grass cutting in our areas, and there is an issue with grass cutting, particularly in Little London, that it's just not being done properly. I think there is a view to update it, but what can be done in the meantime to change things? And I think that this Community Pride Week, where it's like a focused session, I guess, on improving things in the area, would be that push that it needs. So yeah, is there any like scope to be able to do that kind of contractual work while during that week, or would that be something else?
I think if we're going to have a dedicated session on that, it'd be good to, everything's been noted, and then that whole project needs its own attention, I think. I'm keen to just tick off the last 2. Councillor Siri was waiting.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the community pride that you've mentioned, I wondered if you'd thought of linking in with the amazing litter-free groups. I was a bit worried about punishing students and making them litter pick, which is a serious concern, because our Pudsey litter-free group actually work with local schools, and with the councillors we loan out litter picking equipment, and it's through education rather than punishment. So when you mentioned that maybe punish students, that was a bit of a worry. We've also put a number of students through the Duke of Edinburgh by doing regular litter picking, and that's again supported by Litter Free Pudsey. And just on a quick note, Pudsey welcome your task group, please send it to us. I've got a list already for you. So when can you start?
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah, I think the point that Hayley was making around the punish was in response to the councillor's question. So what happens when people are still littering? I think obviously the preferred approach is to change behaviours in the first place, and we'll obviously work more positively with schools and people across all ages. But I think the point was being made was enough's enough when people actually are then still doing it. What are we doing about it? And I think that was Hayley's response to that. The point about the working in with Litter-Free Leeds, absolutely, and again that'll be included in the paper that or the discussion we'll have with you. But just to reassure you for now, in the work and the kind of job description and remit that we're looking to set that team and recruit to, it specifically mentions Litter-Free Leeds as an organisation example of how we'd expect them in those weeks activity to work with those and involve them. We know it's like a movement, so sometimes them is a little bit hard to say who that is, but there are plenty of examples when we know who it is, like you say, councillor, say in your area. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we can't say enough, all of us, like how the appreciation that we have for the Litter-Free Leeds movement, which is really, really significant, and as I understand it, really quite kind of several steps ahead of many other what is happening in other cities. So massive thanks to them. Just finally on this section, I'm just going to bring in Councillor Ali, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to know, a couple of my residents asked me the same question. Do we have any numbers where we can say people have been successfully prosecuted for fly tipping? Thank you.
I'll take that. I'm looking to my left in terms of Amy or Hayley, but yeah, what part of what yes, we do have that information, but what we need to do is be better at sharing that, and A, we need to be recording it. We're not recording it as well as we can do. B, we need to be better at doing it, so we need to do more. And C, we need to have a place where we share that. So we do share that, for example, through Litter-Free Leeds or with members that we're working with in particular cases. And every now and again we do, well, all the time we do a press release. But times have changed, haven't they? You can do a press release, and if you're lucky, live leads or will pick up on it, or maybe the Evening Post, and how many people actually then pick up on that. So we're looking at that, about how we actually have a place where we put everything that we've done that people can access, but because we do a lot, but we are going to do more. So yeah, we'll pick that up, and Amy's nodding. It's one of the key pieces of work she's on with at the moment around that sort of recording. Is there anything to add there, Amy?
No, I don't think so. I think that's about right. Again, it goes back to social media and the use of that as well, and trying to really utilise that in sharing our successful work that we do. But yeah, it's being looked at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation that's going to feed into the next part of the discussion as well, but I think it's a conversation we've already had on environment on the scrutiny board. It's just about comms, communication. Like something just, I've got loads to say, but I'm going to be selfless and not say any of it because we need to move on. But just, I think one thing I would say is, like, it seems to me that the environmental team have on occasions put kind of basically like almost enforcement action tape around fly tipping, and I saw it recently for the first time in a while, and I'm struck. Social media is great, but it's just quite interesting. People see fly tipping, and then there's a whole issue like, if we clear it quickly, then maybe people will dump more. If we leave it, people dump more. So it's almost like a lose-lose. But it's interesting because I think the environmental tape, it gets people's attention. People go, the council are doing something good. Hopefully somebody's going to get busted. We don't know, but maybe they will or won't. So I guess, and again that's for people on that street. They might or might not be on the relevant Facebook groups that we post into. So I do think kind of just communication is so key for just building the confidence of the 90 or 95% of people who aren't fly tipping and aren't littering. And actually, if they feel that we as the council have got their back and are taking action, then that kind of means that they're more likely to report. They're less likely to themselves kind of be tempted to fly tip or litter or whatever. So I just think, comms makes a huge difference. And I think as a council, probably like I think governments in general, we don't give it the attention we should. So thank you all. I'm conscious that we need to move on, and I'm just going to send you a very long list of things, John and co, because we don't have time to deal with them now. But I'm aware that people seem to be taking their own comfort breaks. Are people happy with that? Yes. Okay. Good. So we can move straight on. Good. Just a reminder as well that if there's things you haven't had the opportunity to bring up, the work programme is a live thing, and we can keep on sticking things in. We're just going to move on now to the simpler recycling presentation. I mean, it's back over to you, John, and colleagues for lots more presentation. There's also a lot that you've already pre-circulated, and it follows the report that came to this board last year, Simply Recycling 1, and that was particularly about food waste recycling. As mentioned, we have guests, and really looking forward to hearing what Declan from HW Martin and Dr. Irving can bring, and I'll bring both of you in to respond to John's introductory comments. And so we as a board are being asked to consider whether we're supportive of the approach to continue co-mingling dry recyclables, offer any feedback on the introduction of curbside glass recycling, and also this whole conversation that we keep circling back to around how we can influence behaviour change to drive up recycling rates in the city, and hopefully sometime very soon overtake Manchester. And then, yeah, we've got lots of other officers as well who can offer more insight. So over to you, John and co, and thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep this one a little bit more brief in terms of my speaking, and then hopefully I'll have more time for questions. So the purpose of bringing this paper, which we delayed from last meeting, was, as the Chair says, the second part to the Simpler Recycling update that we're providing to the board. The first one focused on food waste, and this one's focusing on what the government call the dry recycling part of Simpler Recycling. And again, we've provided updates on this to the board over the last 2 or 3 years as the legislation has developed and then been introduced. So the purpose of this report is twofold, really. One is to provide you with, which is in Appendix A, which is effectively a summary and evaluation of our success in meeting the simpler recycling requirements, that the prescribed materials can all now be recycled by Leeds residents through their single green bin. And as part of that report, we're providing a justification, if you like, to yourselves on why we believe that doing that through one recycling bin in Leeds works for Leeds and is working well. Not without some downsides as well, which we're clear about, but we believe it's working well. And what you'll see is the Appendix A referred to as a TEEP report. So TEEP stands for Technically, Environmentally and Economically Practical. That's a government requirement that any council that in this case provides, delivers its legal responsibilities through one bin in this case rather than 2 bins, needs to be able to evidence that is technically, environmentally and economically more practical than having the 2 bins. So there's a kind of we're trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone with this. We're trying to produce something, publish something, open it to scrutiny, and hopefully obtain your support that actually doing one recycling bin in Leeds on balance is the best way to do things, and obviously any challenge around that. At the same time, use this item as a way to explain how it works and for you to question the ins and outs, and that's why DEC in particular is here, from the contractor that manages the green bin waste in Leeds and sorts the materials that we take, DEC, HW Martin, and then finds recycling markets and makes sure as much of that is recycled as possible. So DEC's here kind of as an expert witness in that regard, independent from the council in terms of he's not council, but obviously we do contract HW Martin, so there is a contractual relationship there. So all I'd really highlight so the second part of the second appendix, second part of the report, is then just to focus a little bit closer down on glass as one of the main new elements of material that we could put in the green bin from August 2024. Yep, and provides some statistical analysis since then of how successful and the pros and cons of the glass and where we've gone with that. And again, seeks your views and hopefully support for continuing that way of collecting glass in Leeds. So I just finish on just drawing attention to a couple of 2 or 3 bullet points that I've summarised on, I think it's page 22 in your documents in the cover report. So in terms of us recycling all the dry materials through the one green bin, the one bin in Leeds, We do think that allows Leeds a flexibility to adapt and change to changes in composition and impacts of future legislation that could adversely affect the contracts we have and the way that things are sorted in future. I gave examples in the previous paper when we were looking ahead of things like deposit return scheme, and you probably recall I mentioned that means things like plastic and metal cans and drinking containers in future won't probably be in the green bin, or certainly by as much as people will be seeking the value for those. And stuff like the emissions trading scheme, again, will affect us in terms of making sure that less and less plastic in particular. But I'm looking at you, Phil. What are the other couple of main items and materials the emission trading scheme will affect in terms of getting them out of the black bin?
Thank you. It's anything that's got a fossil fuel content, and that obviously plastics is the worst. But as you can imagine nowadays, even textiles have fossil fuel content, as the majority of them are not natural fibres anymore, particularly fast fashion and stuff like that. So it actually is quite a lot of the waste that we collect. There are only a few things that won't be included.
Thanks, Phil. We believe having the one recycling bin as opposed to a lot of councils which have two. So just explain that those that aren't aware of that. Many councils have two recycling bins, so you divide out, some have more than two. So usually that means you divide out your sort of harder materials and your softer materials. So the textiles, the fabric materials, so things like cardboard, paper, the softer stuff, you put in one bin, and the metals, the plastics, the glass, you put in another bin. The principle being that they can, in principle, be taken and don't require sorting out. So you're saving in that sorting process. And in principle, or we dispute this a bit in practice, it decreases the potential contamination of those softer materials by things like broken glass, but also water and other sort of liquid deposits that might be in the tins and bottles and things that might otherwise get on the paper and card and make them less recyclable. We believe, and this is what this report hopefully reassures you around, is that the Leeds approach doesn't adversely affect those recycling targets for those particular softer materials, but critically it means that we can deliver this 3-bin strategy for Leeds. So rather than having 4 bins, 2 bins for recycling, 1 bin for garden waste and 1 bin for your residual black waste bin, we can deliver that through a 3-bin strategy, which obviously makes it simpler for people, the households, to know that they can put all the recycling in 1 bin, they don't need to sort them out, and they only have 1 bin day for that bin to remember to put the bin out on. So we believe that works well in Leeds. Henry might have a view on that and then talk about some of the history of that and the pros and cons. And we don't believe there is a significant environmental benefit to separating out the paper cardboard and changing the current regime, and some of that evidence is provided in the report. And I'll just quickly move on to the second part of and then I'll finish. The second part of the paper talks about the success of moving glass into the green bin in August on Yorkshire Day in 2024, and gives plenty of data around that in terms of sharing with you the amount of glass we've collected, the increase in the rates of glass we collect across the city as a result of that. But as in the spirit of what we're trying to do at Scrutiny, also lays clear the challenge that we still have 32% or something, I can't remember the figure at the top of my head, over 30% of glass still is going in the black bin. So despite the fact that people have got a green bin and the bottle banks still exist, there's still 30% of glass being put in the black bin. So that again leads us on to how do we change those behaviours even more, because there really is no excuse now. Put it in your green bin or bottle bank. Well, there's only one other place it can go really, and that's the black bin. And so why is it going in there still? But critically, as well as the report highlights, all the glass that we do collect in the green bins and still in the bottle banks is recycled, and about 84% of it is remelted. So through the process that I'm sure Dec will explain, if you need him to, all that glass is taken away. 84% of it is made into new glass bottles and jars, and that part of the remelting is done in Yorkshire. And then the other 15-16% of the glass which is unable to be remelted is used for other purposes, recycled, particularly filtration and making aggregate stuff like that. Yeah, so it's all fully recycled, so nothing goes to incineration or landfill of the glass we collect. I think I'll put. Oh, sorry, there is a third appendix. I forgot. There is a third appendix, which is the composition of waste that currently goes in the black bin. I thought it'd be useful for you to provide that. I've referenced it 2 or 3 times now. I think that's the challenge, and that provides that challenge in a good graphic to say, look, this is still the kind of stuff that's still going in the black bin. Obviously, a lot of that's food waste, and we need to come back with an answer on that. But there's a considerable amount of that stuff, such as glass that I've just mentioned, that's going in the black bin that just doesn't need to. And again, that's about the behaviour change that 1 or 2 councillors here have referenced. And again, I'm sure Henry has a view on himself. And that's kind of, again, I threw that back as a bit of challenge in the last section to yourselves. Is how do we use you? How do we work together? How do we use the community committees and ward councillors' influence and leadership in the community and knowledge of networks and people and activists, etc. And you know what works best for your communities. It'll work differently as it in Harewood as it would do in Harewood. You know, the different places, different challenges, different opportunities. How do we work with yourselves on that? And particularly, I think that challenge of getting more out of the black bin into the green bin. How can we do that? That's like kind of a challenge back. I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you so much. So just before we come on to members, I'd be keen to just bring in Declan for any comments, remarks. If you don't have any, that's fine. But if you do, now's your moment.
As John alluded to regarding the fibres, I think the big concern prior to putting glass in was whether we could have any detrimental effect on the quality of the papers that we're producing. The systems that are now out there and we've got in place and invested in make sure that the quality of the paper is still a very good quality that can still be recycled through the mills that are in the UK and within Europe and Asia. Very far advanced technology that they've got, and like I said, the material that we're producing has not had any detrimental effect with the inclusion of glass in there through the process that we've implemented within the MRF.
Yeah, just to specifically, am I right in saying that at your plants you now have some particular new machines as of the last year to help you to do this?
We've installed another trommel, which is basically it's like an inside of a washing machine. So it rotates round, the material drops down, and all the material below 40 mil, which is predominantly glass and bits of shredded paper and things like that that the public put in. We take that then down to our site in Derbyshire, North East Derbyshire, and it grades it into above 10 mil and below 10 millimetres. And when it's doing that, after it's graded it, we actually suck all the light fraction off, which is the shredded paper and bits of things like that that's actually on the glass bottle itself. We take all that off, and that allows us then to sell all the above 10 mil into companies within Yorkshire, like John said, for remelt. The other 10 mil, below 10 mil, would normally go into aggregate, but we don't. We send it to a company in Derbyshire. They put it into filtration medium, they put it into shot blast, they put it into, it's all imploded, so they put it into fiberglass for your insulation in your houses and things like that.
Brilliant. Can I just take the opportunity about that? I've been to HW Martin a couple of times, and I was just really struck by you and your colleagues, like your passion and your commitment, and just your teams working really hard. And it was before as a councillor, so I don't think you were even doing it to impress me. I think you were just doing it just naturally. So huge thanks to you and your colleagues for doing such brilliant work there. So thank you. Anyway, there might well be questions for you from members shortly, but I'm still going to bring in Councillor Irving. Sorry, flipping heck! You stand for election, and then the problem will be resolved. So please, would be interested to hear what your comments and responses are.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, I am a historian, not a councillor, and I'm hoping really to provide a bit of a sort of longer view here. So I'm a historian of waste resources and the circular economy, with an interest in behaviour change, and that perspective gives me a sense of what has worked historically, but also what some of the challenges are. I should also say I am a Leeds resident, so I'm here as a sort of critical friend, somebody who is invested in this, in fact a Headingley and Hyde Park resident, so I'm aware of those challenges as well as some of the opportunities. And I think I would just echo a couple of things that have already been raised. The first is that Leeds does have a really impressive track record. So I think actually that's something that we can be bolder about and we can build on. We've heard the reference already today with the comparison with Manchester. It's not a fair comparison. Those statistics are about Manchester City Council. They're much, much smaller and far less complex in terms of the urban geography than we are. We are doing really, really well as a core city. However, there are things, I think, which can still be improved. The second thing, when you take that long view, which I think actually we really should emphasise, is that Leeds has been doing a lot of this stuff for a very long time. It's in John's report that these are services that have grown up over 30 years. In fact, it's almost 40. So Leeds was the first place in the UK to collect recycling from a wheelie bin. That is impressive. Leeds was at the forefront of those bring sites, so things like HWRCs, things like bring banks, bottle banks, glass banks and so on during the 1980s. So there's a really important history here about things which have previously worked. And also the links that we've heard today about the council working with the voluntary sector. So whether that's Revive, whether it's Seagulls, whether it's food waste reduction charities. Again, there's a long history of Leeds doing this and actually doing it very, very effectively. But I think there are things that we can improve, and I think that we can build on the foundations that we have as a city. So we've heard that there is this 2 or 3 bin strategy. Certainly in terms of dry waste, dry recycling, I think the TEEP report sets us out really clearly that this is the right mode for a city like Leeds. However, I will come back to the point that actually I think you need the food waste in order to make this work. So although today you're considering dry recycling separately from food waste, I think from a behaviour change perspective, but also just thinking in terms of the sheer composition of that bin, you need to see these things as interlinked. And actually the food waste has got the ability to unlock a lot of further change. And you see that in councils which have adopted this, whether they're in England or if you look across the border to places like Wales. Really actually food and dry shouldn't be seen as two completely separate entities. They need to be part of that same strategy.
Many thanks. I mean, perhaps this will come out in the questions, but I'm going to ask anyway in case you have an immediate response. I suppose I'd be interested to know, my 2 questions for you initially are you able to comment briefly about kind of really key leverage points that other local authorities have used to drive up recycling and in kind of engagement and inspiration around recycling? And I suppose the other thing would be somewhat a tangent from that, this particular question around communication. So like, we talk a lot within council about the administration of the systems, and that's really important. But I suppose to what extent are we as the council perhaps responsible or able to try to also give attention to communication as to really drive that up?
So I mean we're looking here at behaviour change, and there are effectively 3 different parts of this. So there has to be a willingness on behalf of the individual to do the right thing. So that comes back to a lot of the points about pride of place that's been mentioned so far today. The other 2 parts which are absolutely crucial with behaviour change are providing the right service. So actually the fundamentals in terms of the frequency, the type of bins, how easy it is to use, that's really important. And I think that is something where you can be confident that Leeds is getting it right. So again, in John's report, there's nowhere in the city that's not getting a 2-weekly collection, a fortnightly collection. Many places are getting a bit more than that actually in some of the more problematic wards. You've also got this very simple differential between residual and recycling. So there's not much more you can do to make that system simpler, apart from maybe thinking about items that aren't currently recycled, so whether that's textiles, whether it's food. The other third part of behaviour change is, of course, communications. So that's not enough on its own, but it is the factor that will allow you to make the most of the structure you have and the willingness of people to do the right thing. And I think if you look at what other authorities do, again, we're on the right lines. So one of the things I would say that Leeds does very well is that this is about positive messaging. So there is a sort of, when you look at behaviour change, it's most effective when the message is a positive one. We see that historically, we see it in other local authorities today, and that's something that we are doing with a lot of that content. I think there are ways that you could deepen and kind of add depth to what is done, but also possibly breadth. You know, I think budgets are difficult, and this is an area which does require resourcing, but it is something which you can get those messages across early, and we've heard about education again as being one way to do this. Leeds is building on some of the national campaigns, so we have things like Wraps Recycle Week, we have Keep Britain Tidy, the work that they do. So I think utilising that wider opportunity as much as possible is important, keeping the positive message, but then also trying to make it actually seem personable. So again, it goes back to the ideas about highlighting particular places, particular kind of that sense of identity. And again, I think that there is a positive story here. You know, Leeds is good at this, so we can genuinely say that there is this kind of personal, place-based message, which maybe will encourage more people to do the right thing.
Thank you so much. So, members, over to you. Any questions?
I'll go first. And sorry, John, because you know what I'm going to pick up probably. Food waste. Do we have the data from the Rothwell, any data from the Rothwell trial pilot that we had going for years, in terms of did it impact on recycling rate, other recycling rates at the time? Because I take the point. I think if people get used to doing it, then they look at other things they can do. I mean, I'm much more aware now of what I recycle than I would have been a few years ago. And making it easy is obviously the best way to do it. But I think the data from that trial would be useful. It'd be also useful when we do look at the Wetherby trial to be able to compare commingling with food waste. So there's two aspects there. I was just going to go on to community committees. I've just looked at our Facebook page for the Outer South, which clearly I don't look at, because there's nothing on it since 2025 from anybody. So I think you could make use of the Facebook. If it pops up on if I'm following it and it pops up, I will share it. I share Leeds Recycles when I see it, but I don't see it all the time. So I think there is something we could do around those community committee Facebook pages. I mean, obviously not everybody uses Facebook, but it's a start. And the other thing, we have got a volunteer in our ward now that is very keen on keeping our community notice boards up to date. So if there's any posters or flyers that we could put out there about what you can and can't put in your green bin, that even if it's refreshed every so often as we get more things that can go in the green bin, we do have people that could do that. I mean, housing are supposed to look after those notice boards, but don't appear to. But we do. So that is another option. And then just one last thing, and this is a bit out there. Do we have the recycling rates by ward or community committee? Is there an element of competition or an improvement league thing that we could do to say, you know, Rothwell was bottom 6 months ago and we've done all this work and you've moved one place up or something, or, you know, you were at the top, or I don't know whether that would incentivise people or not, but perhaps we can make more of it. Even an award, so a ward could get something for that ward generally to benefit from as a result of doing more. I don't know.
Can I just come in before you answer? Because one part of the conversation we had last week in the briefing before this meeting was not dissimilar to what you were just saying, which was wanting to yeah, whether or not we kind of move towards having a league table, which I think would be brilliant because everyone loves a bit of competition. But I think it'd be great to develop some very targeted work in perhaps a number of wards, maybe just a handful of wards, perhaps quite different wards. It needs to be in conjunction with the local councillors and the community committee, but then to really kind of drill down into those communities and try to experiment with different approaches and very much collaborative work with the communities in those areas to work out what really makes a difference and what works and what doesn't work. So analysis of strategies for just getting, I mean, there's education around recycling, but there's also a key thing about people just feeling bothered and inspired about recycling. People often have the information but don't necessarily, if they're not bothered, then they won't do it. Anyway, so over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Chapman. Some interesting questions there. I think quickly go through all three. The food waste pilot in Rothwell and the usefulness of the evaluation data we've gathered from that. We do have some data around that, albeit it's obviously, by its nature, quite old now. And I think it's a good idea to bring that together, what we do have, together with, we would probably argue that there's a lot more qualitative and quantitative data from other councils that are doing that now, that we can bring to the table, rather than just the historic stuff from the Rothwell. I hesitate to call it a pilot. We all know that it was the most long-standing pilot in council history, probably. And so yeah, I think I think when we bring a paper, which I think has been asked for 2 or 3 times now, so I'm sure we'll be doing it on evaluating the Wetherby and Collingham and Boston Spa pilot. Yeah, that we need to bring that together with what information we have around collecting food separately from what we've got from Rothwell, but also our partner council, which we work closely with. We've got good relationships, certainly across the region, and we can look at that in terms of bringing them together in one report, certainly. The comms and using committee structures better than yourselves and having things available, I think it's a really good idea. I think we should look at that in terms of, we do have the Leeds Recycles social media, which I say to everybody, please join that, befriend that, whatever the right word is, and share. There's a lot of stuff on there that you've talked about, that is shared around the posting of what goes in the green bin, etc., and that's easily then shared by yourselves to encourage people as well to join that Leeds Recycles. Looking at Nick at the top, because Nick's particularly the comms stuff around that, make sure that's populated. But maybe do need to look at creating some kind of members SharePoint comms, what's the right word, basically deposit stuff, and make that available so that you've got everything in one place. We've probably got so many SharePoints and things anyway, but if you don't want to use it, you don't want to use it. I think looking at something like that's easy to access. But even I don't think. Well, I don't want to get too much into the realms of what I think about the council's website, but you can't. Maybe it's something we need to look at in terms of the council's website too, in terms of that the public being able to access things like that. But certainly for members, I think if we look at that, and if that would be welcome, Nick, we'll have a look at what we can do around that. And then the ward recycling rates competition, I'd love to do that. I think it's a fantastic idea, and we've talked about that before, and that would be so good. I'm not sure how all ward members would take that, but I think it would be so good, and just task the public and set a Blue Peter style, whatever it might be. The problem we've got is you can't. So you can't, and Deck will shake, nod his head, whatever. The way that we collect waste from the green bins is we literally collect them all in the wagons, as you know, and those that you've been to HW Market will see it. They then just empty it all into the one tipping shed, and then a JCB thing comes along and takes it and puts it on the conveyor belt. So it's lost. You can't capture. So DEC provides with loads of qualitative information that you've got in the report around the different compositions of this goes where, but it's the totality. It's the city-wide level. So we can give you all that good analysis at a city level, but we can't say how much of that came from wherever. The only thing that we can do, and as we make the collection routes more coterminous community committees, is give you the absolute data of what we've collected, the overall tonnages. So we can give that, but again, that it's got to be really carefully used. That. So, for example, if we said the green bin waste in a certain part of let's not name shame, but a certain part of the city where it's really challenging for those communities, and to be honest, there's a lot of green bin waste being collected. The tonnages are probably really high, but 50, 60, 70% of it is full of contamination, you know, from nappies to food waste to whatever. But somewhere else, in another part of the city where residents are really good at putting the right stuff in the green bin, their tonnages are less, because actually good recycling doesn't weigh much. That's the sort of perverse thing about recycling. It's all measured in tonnage, but actually it's volumes of recycling that speaks volumes. So again, it's difficult to compare apples and oranges and actually end up contradicting yourself by saying that looks good. So yeah, I'd love to. The only possible way around it is every time this year we do a composition, I wouldn't remember the word, composition analysis. But that's done on a citywide sampling. So is it 250 households or streets? Households. So we sample basically 250 households across the city, and it's literally taken by a company contractor who takes them away, empties the bins onto a warehouse floor somewhere, and just goes through and creates little piles and then measures them, and that's how we get that composition analysis that you've seen in that graphic. But that costs us quite a bit of money to do once a year to provide us with that citywide level of detail. We could potentially do that in a ward, but you'd have to multiply that up 33 times the cost and the work involved, etc. So I would suggest it's not worth it, which is a real shame. There is a way that we could potentially work with the ward or two just to try that and do a composition analysis in a maybe 2 different types of ward to try that would help inform potentially what's happening and the composition, and then track that, do it again the next year, and if we've done anything particular in that ward, has it made a difference? That's the only way I think we could potentially go. But to do it as a kind of citywide norm, unfortunately, it's a real shame. Real shame.
Oh yeah, go on.
Sorry, really quickly. When you said we'd compare the Wetherby trial with other councils in the region, can we look outside the region as well? Because we do have, some councils do have excellent recycling rates, and it would be good to be able to compare us with the best, not just regionally, because the core cities are not that good at doing it, are they, looking at those recycling rates? So, that was that ask. And SharePoints. I don't use my council laptop, and I can't access the SharePoints unless I go and get my council laptop. So whilst the SharePoints are a good idea, I probably wouldn't see them. Emailing them out to us might be the better option. Just an idea, or suggestion for me anyway.
So it's just on that point too about food waste. So again, the wider context here is that there's a change in national legislation, which means that a large number of English local authorities have started collecting food waste this year. If you're looking at those that have got more embedded services, actually it's Wales which is your best guide. Most Welsh authorities have been collecting food waste for about 10 years. And the message that they seem to suggest is that the minute you start collecting food waste as a separate recycling service, actually it encourages much better behaviour across the piece, because you're much more aware of what it is that you're throwing away. But that is a challenge, because this is expensive. There are then contracts. You've got to think about where that material goes. In Wales, the vast majority, I think almost all of the food waste is going into anaerobic digestion, so it's been turned into energy. That's not necessarily possible if you have a commingled food waste and organic garden waste collection, because the material is just not quite what's needed. So there are big questions there, but the evidence suggests that food waste can be a key that unlocks that behaviour change.
Councillor Farmer?
Yes, I had a nice wave of nostalgia when John mentioned Blue Peter. I was thinking about milk bottle tops there and being recycled. It was more an observation, really, on the success story of Leeds, and we don't shout about it, echoing what Dr. Irving said as well earlier. I mean, I'm a new councillor, I've been here for 10 weeks. Most of what I've read in this report I wasn't aware of. I believe, as I think probably lots of residents believe, if they put things in bins, they don't necessarily get recycled. They go in the same landfill. You know, the fact that, 0.09% of Leeds waste goes into landfill, but in Newcastle it's 15%. That's a huge difference, and that's a big success story, I think. And you said today that every single glass bottle gets recycled. Well, I didn't believe that. So I'm trusting you're saying that, and that's something... Trusting you're saying that, apologies. But that's something we should be shouting about. And there's a lot of why is it secret? Why am I finding this out for the first time reading this report or hearing it today, and why we're not shouting it? Because these are great success stories for the city.
Yes, absolutely. But just to provide some reassurance on that, and I think this is why this is a really good session for us to get some reality checks around things and to reassess and rethink and just to think what we need to do potentially differently. And it's often the challenge around communication is around, just because we did it a few months ago, a year ago, then we don't need to revisit it. I think we're doing ourselves a bit of disservice there, because we do. So Nick's got quite a sophisticated programme of comms around trying to get those messages out and repeating those messages. So we have done, for example, social media friendly videos around what happens to the glass, what happens to recycling. We got what's the name of the company, Leeds Plus, involved in making those videos, and then they belong to us now. And every now and again, Nick, through the Leeds Recycles Facebook page primarily, post them again. But I think our problem there is we're often reaching the people that are already converted. We're preaching to the converted, and yes, that'll help. It'll help trickle that message to their. It'll always reach someone new, but it doesn't dramatically change the audience that we're reaching and the people we need to really change the behaviours of. So yeah, we do need to do more around that. But just to provide reassurance, and again, if we set the SharePoint or whatever we do, we'll include those links and those videos and that information that we've shared before, so you can reshare it. But yeah, anything you want to add to that, Nick, at all?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Leeds Recycle social media is a good sort of first signposting place to go if you want to find any more information out. We've got some great videos and sort of just some shorts around what happens to the recycling as well, because when it comes to behaviour change, people are at different parts of that journey, whereas some of our sort of more keener ones, the eco-evangelists that John mentions, the ones that are already listening to us very closely, they like the detail, and we provide that. And then there are also the people who are maybe not recycling yet. Those are the trickier ones to get to. I mean, we do targeted social media, but I think with that we also have to use some of our partners around the city. So we do a lot of work with sort of litter-free Leeds through the universities like Dr. Irvin's Leeds Beckett's. We do work with them to sort of push the information out that way, so it's not just coming top down from the council, but it's also coming across from peers. And I think that's the big challenge really, is trying to get, like yourselves, you'll have your followers. If we were to provide a toolkit, it would help with cascading that information out and getting these good news stories to the people that need them to shift behaviour.
Just building on that before coming to you, Councillor Hay, I suppose it'd be, so we as councils obviously have reach, but thinking about those partnerships, and litter-free Leeds are brilliant, but they also, to an extent, are also people involved in litter-free Leeds, and probably people who know people involved in litter-free Leeds are probably, to an extent, the converted. But I suppose it'd be interesting, again, this is a conversation that came up last week, it'd be interesting to look at some form of kind of innovation fund, whether the council could provide possibly relatively small amounts of money in the grand scheme of things to kind of community partners to try to drive up recycling, because obviously in a way that hopefully you get under the skin of communities and start to kind of get messaging going into networks where they currently not talking about recycling. And the idea being that would be an invest to save, because if we can start to drive up recycling rates across the city, then potentially we as a council then kind of save an absolute shed load of cash. So yeah, I'd be interested to know. It's a conversation for longer than today, but the idea in conjunction with the locality work, the very kind of trying to get under the skin of communities across the city, just providing resources, but also money, like seed funding to partners in communities to try to drive up recycling and try to drive up inspiration. Councillor Haig.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, yes, recycling and engaging people, that is so important, but obviously before that, we don't want people to put stuff into recycling and into residual waste bins. We actually want them to reduce the amount of waste they produce and also to reuse what they do. And I'm just wondering what work we can do with our communities around that, especially when we're talking about food waste, which, I mean, it's something that many of us are aware that probably we produce more food waste than we ought, and how we can actually build that programme of education where people are buying the right stuff and using it and understanding when it's safe to eat stuff, when it needs to be thrown away, and also just a sort of kind of side technical issue on if we're going to start putting food waste in with garden waste, which used to be the direction. I'm aware that in some authorities they have a compartmentalised bin, so you can keep two different kinds of waste separate. And I know that's extra cost and complications, but I think when we're talking about using anaerobic digestion and the technologies for the two different kinds of waste, is that something we should be looking at?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come into that first. I mean, on the point about compartmentalised bins, so again, actually, you could go back to the 1990s. Leeds used these in its first trials. So in Kirkstall Ward, actually in 1990, what they found is that actually in practice, they are quite difficult to use. There's lots of contamination, and there were also collection costs because you had to have a new fleet of vehicles. So actually Leeds moved away from the compartmentalised bin towards the system that we have now. On the broader point there about reuse, I think this is hugely important. So we talk about this idea of a waste hierarchy. So you want to avoid the waste in the first place. You do that by emphasising, firstly, reduction, repair, actually keeping materials in use for longer. There are some really interesting things which have been tried in other places, particularly around things like waste electronics. So repair vouchers, trying to incentivise people to get materials repaired rather than thrown away. We've also talked today about things like Revive and that kind of network of reuse shops, which can play a really important role. All of that, I think, is key. But with something like food waste, actually the recycling service itself can lead to that reduction because it's another way of making visible the waste that happens within the home. So I think in terms of an easy win, that's probably one of the easier. And then you're having to unlock some of those more complicated behaviour change, options. And again, if we look at the comp analysis, something that struck me reading through the report is that when you add up all of the currently recyclable waste that's put into a black bin, it comes to about 20%. Food waste is 29%. So just in terms of your tonnage and in terms of your volume, that seems to be the big. That's the big kind of thing which there is an opportunity perhaps to change in coming years.
Thank you. I'd want to add, because, I mean, some of you will know this, but some of you don't. I mean, so there's the whole movement, an international movement called the Repair Cafe movement. The good news is, again, if we're going to shout about how brilliant Leeds is, so Leeds is a national epicentre for repair cafes. And like you said, there's about, I think, 12 or 13 across the city. Other cities, if they're lucky, have one. And so that's a growing movement. And I think to an extent that is also shifting kind of culture and behaviour, I think, to an extent. However, I also think that events like that and a kind of process like that will always be relatively niche, and actually I think kind of more broad-ranging systems that kind of catch tens or hundreds of thousands of people are kind of also where we need to go at. I think just one thing, I suppose going back to you, Dr. Irving, I'm sure you're going to become a counsellor in the future and it'll all become true. I suppose I'm interested to hear the response, which is, so you're, as I understand it, you're kind of really challenging the commingling of food waste and garden waste. And I suppose I'd be interested to hear our colleagues respond to that, I suppose, provocation, if that's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, we covered food waste in quite a lot of detail at the Simpler Recycling Part 1 paper that we did in January. So to a degree, I don't really want to go over that again. And what we said was we'd come back to yourselves at a later date in this year around an update on that, where we are with that approved way forward strategy that we've got for that. So to a large degree, the answers will come in that update, which will include, as Councillor Chapman alluded to, sort of the pilot and the results of the pilot, and then potentially previous pilots and other work. So to a large degree, we'd expect to come back to you later in this municipal year to give you a more considered response to that. As I say, we've made the case before in January around the pros and cons between moving forward and effectively would be abandoning an idea of 3 bins for Leeds and the commingling, and if we were to move to a separate food waste collection. And the council's at the moment policy and strategy is not to abandon that ambition, and is to move forward with a 3-bin strategy for Leeds and commingle, and that's what we are currently in the marketplace for at the moment, to go to contractors to understand if that's deliverable. So we've completed a fresh market sounding exercise recently, and just going through the results of that, and that will, together with the initial results from the pilot, will help inform a potential procurement process to go for a more thorough procurement exercise to see if there are actually people out there that can take and manage and process commingled waste, and how much that would cost, and all things that are aside from that. But also at the same time, we're looking at a similar exercise as a plan B for around, well, what happens if that's not affordable or doable within timescales or practical. And we're also going back to the market around separate food waste collections. So we've got up-to-date data on both. So we'll be able to come back to scrutiny later this municipal year on that and give you a more detailed update on that and what that's telling us. So that's where we are, really. Yeah.
So on that, that's probably the only person that's actually had the food waste collection. We talked about it earlier. It was more like 3.5 bins, wasn't it? Or it would be, because it was a little bin. It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't a huge size wheelie bin. It was a fraction of the size of a wheelie bin, which I don't think is quite as problematical to people as having 4 great big wheelie bins outside your house. That was it, really. Just a comment to say, I know the policy is a 3-bin policy, but we're not talking about 4 huge size wheelie bins either, so it's worth remembering that.
Through the chair, so that's a really fair point, and I wouldn't want to mislead for one moment. It's a misspoke, should we say that? I think the policy is trying to get a 3-bin policy, but I was inferring therefore it's a 4-bin policy. If you're absolutely right, it's a 4-container stroke bin policy, isn't it? That probably would be the solution otherwise if it was a separate food waste collection, absolutely. But of course, just a container of that size causes a huge problem for significant parts of the city where, for example, terraced housing and where there's no drives and what have you. But that's going to be a problem anyway, even with the 3 bins. So I take the point, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you all. We do still have a little bit of time, so I am going to jump in with a few things. I think one of my takeaways from today is just the forthcoming legislative changes around bottle returns or kind of packaging returns, because I just think in ways that we probably can't quite foresee, that just seems like potentially a kind of huge game changer on lots of fronts. And again, it links closely with, of course, with behaviour change, because the 5p plastic bag thing, money drives behaviour to a large extent. So I guess in many ways, I guess it's a case of kind of watch this space with that. I suppose I've got a few queries to throw at you, which is kind of in the realm of recycling. I think one question I had was so when you look at the stats, mattresses take up a disproportionate kind of amounts. They're quite hard to assemble. I'm aware that in other parts of the country that is something that has so in Leeds we have a culture of innovation, be it Seagulls and kind of Revive and others, and I'd be interested to know how much attention we or others are giving to mattress disassembly, or something we could give attention to. I'll stop there.
Mattresses. I'd just say we've looked into recycling mattresses, deconstruction plants over the years, and it always really ended up as being unaffordable for us. And there's a slightly added problem more recently, is that there is the potential of mattresses becoming something what we call POPs, which means it contains persistent organic pollutants. And if it is designated as being containing POPs by government, we have to incinerate them. They can't be recycled anymore. So it's just that added complication. If we put a lot of work into something, set up a contract, and then it all has to end because it becomes this persistent organic pollutant.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Hills?
Okay, I have sort of three main questions. In terms of there's been a reduction in recycling paper as a result of the glass inclusion, and it's been offset, I think, by 162 tonnes, or 159 to 162. So there has been that, keeping of the level of recycling. I wonder, because there's a proposal in here as well for what would a separate bin for paper or fibres look like, and it seems like that's not really possible or recommended, especially with the 3-bin strategy. So I wonder if maybe someone from HW Martin or Dr. Evan could comment on whether it would be possible with technological changes to kind of remove the excess moisture from that paper beforehand. Is that possible? Is there changes that could be made at the recycling facilities that would allow us to continue recycling that level of paper? It would bring up recycling levels across the city. It might be something we can look into. Second question is about the emissions trading scheme and just plans for the future, because it seems like within, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, that's going to be a really big financial burden for the council. And obviously it's a good thing that it's happening, but also if it then leads to a really drastic increase in the financial burden on the council, that is going to be something that's coming down the line pretty quickly. And if we can do something relatively radical, even if it costs a lot now, it might reduce the cost in future. That could, be the problem. The other thing is just on comms, and if there is going to be some kind of strategy for improving our comms strategy on recycling. I remember on the social media site that won't be named, seeing some posts that went extremely viral a long time ago about how it was total misinformation, but recycling is a sham. Nothing actually gets recycled. The companies just sort of put it in the same place. It all goes to landfill. And obviously that's not happening in Leeds, and we have really, good stats and stuff that prove that. But it really was a bit of a public relations nuclear bomb. And now, in the aftermath of that, I still hear students around my area saying this kind of thing, that, oh, it's all fake, and there are some, it doesn't actually happen. So I wonder if the comm strategy could include that kind of dispelling some really basic myths, because some people are coming at it from that level, and we know that we need to focus on getting the stats out there and making it better, but for a lot of people the starting point is a lot further back. We might need to start there. So if there's a comm strategy just including that kind of thing would be good. Sorry, that was a lot of things.
No, thank you. That's really helpful, Councillor Hills. Thank you. So 3 points then. I might pass over to one of yourselves around the paper moisture content issue. But just on that paper issue in itself, and Phil, I don't know if you can say a few words about that, because as you can imagine, we've had a lot of discussions around that to we don't hide anything. This is about being open, transparent, and understanding what's working, not working. Phil, you jump in, but our conclusion with that was that there is a nationwide decrease in that overall tonnages of things like paper and magazines and such like that are there anyway. It's a little bit difficult, so you've got to look at the trend line, because it goes a bit up and down all over the place, doesn't it? But if you look at the trend line, there was a general trend line down, which, to be honest, isn't a surprise, is it? People aren't reading as much magazines and newspapers, and even the free stuff that comes through the door is probably less than it used to be, thankfully. But what is still there is the sort of paper that you get in the Amazon packaging and stuff that that you find any boxes that things are wrapped in. So there's a general decrease anyway. So what we're trying to understand was how have we decreased by more than the trend line would have shown, and therefore what is that? So again, perhaps you can comment on that, Phil, in terms of that statistical analysis we've done. And then in terms of the technical side of that, to say, okay, well, let's, if we accept that that's how we're going to collect things, as you say, how do we therefore, is there anything we can do to for the way we capture it, to then get more out of the paper? But perhaps you can come in on that deck around the technical side of it. I think you're going to say it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's not just about, it's about the material then becomes, once it's on the conveyor belt, you've kind of lost it already, haven't you? Because it's already falling apart. I'll let you answer that, because then it's more expert than me. So can we just do it in that way first, stats, and then the technical sort of response?
So we kind of expected that paper would reduce. It's happened on a lot of other local authorities when they've introduced glass to a commingled scheme. But we kind of, when we analysed all the different solutions and what you know, would give the best environmental benefit, the best recycling, the best economic benefit to us, it actually, the process that Martins do is slightly different from most materials recycling facilities. And it's when he was talking about the less than 10 mil glass, that normally is not classed as recycling, goes off somewhere. So by introducing paper and glass into the green bin, we expected a loss of paper, but it was more than replaced by the increase in recycling we were getting from the glass. And we kind of put a value more on glass than paper, because paper can only be recycled once or twice maximum, but glass is kind of infinite. It can go on and on and on. So we saw it as a bit more of a valuable material to try and keep in that like circular economy.
I think, that's kind of all in the report. But just on going a bit further than that, obviously, if there's anything that can be done to keep recycling that paper anyway, obviously, if it can be recycled 2 to 3 times, it's still good to try and do that. Whether there is any strategies technologically, it might not be possible. You know, the technology just might not be there. But if there is, how much would it cost? Is it something we've tried? And whether H.W. Martin's looked into it, because I would imagine like implementing that for what you're saying is not that much benefit, might not be value for money, especially if it's coming from the council. It has to be value for money. Just whether it's been looked into at all.
Trying to dry it it's impossible to do it. The problem we've got is with the moisture within the glass bottles. It's that's causing the issue. It's going into the paper and impregnating into that and making it damp. So when it's going through the trommel, it's actually breaking up and coming through into the screens, through the screens. So it can't be possibly extracted to try and recycle it. And not only that, with it being damp, small shards of glass are actually sticking to that, which is making it again impossible. If we could dry it, you know, it's then another movement on again to try and get the glass off of that fibres as well. But also, as you alluded to, fibres are declining. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed on Let's Recycle on Friday, Palm Paper, the largest paper mill in the UK, they've now decided moved away from recycling paper. They're going on to recycled cardboard because they've been such a decline since COVID. I mean, it started before COVID, but the decline in papers now that's within the recycler, and it's just not worth the while to try and recycle in the UK the fibres.
There was just a couple more questions.
Sorry, Chair, there's two of the points Councillor Hill's raised. Yep. One was around ETS and around, is it going to be, well, absolutely agree, and that's part of why everything we've discussed today, we've got to try and work out between us what our strategy is, what we're best focusing on. Hopefully what we've done today is laid bare the sort of complexity of it all. And we've all got only a certain amount of time and energy and effort, so what do we focus on? And that is one of the questions that we've got is, and I think you're right, it's such a big thing that we're going to have to make sure that we have a real focus on that over the next 2 or 3 years, around the sort of materials. But that doesn't really, that's not at odds with what we should be doing anyway, because as Phil says, the kind of stuff that we need to take out the black bin to reduce the ETS liability is the kind of stuff we should be doing anyway. More plastics and all those sort of things, and batteries and stuff like that end up in there. And the big one, I think someone mentioned it earlier, the big one's textiles, and that's something we really need to think through. What is, have we got a different approach to that? Is there something we can do differently around textiles? Because I think that's the big one in terms of ETS. About that, it's an amazing amount of textiles that are still in the green bin. They find their way in the green bin. I think ones that are in the green bin, don't tell everybody you can put it in the green bin, by the way. But where it does appear in the green bin, we're in public, aren't we? Oh well. Where it does appear in the green bin, from the naughty people who put it in the green bin, HW Martin do try the best to try and extract that and do something with it, and you do that successfully, don't you? But you couldn't cope with any more. But yeah, all right.
Just on textiles, about 14 years ago, Leeds did look at putting textiles in the green bins. The issue you've got is, by putting textiles in the green bins, is one, it gets tangled up in the machinery that they've got in there. It gets impregnated with waste that's in there, so they looked at putting it into a bag. The problem you've got is it needed to be a bag that wasn't going to get ripped open through the process, which again is another cost to the council to go down and getting a bag that is going to be sustainable, that's going to have to be then recollected and redistributed out to the residents. So. And textiles now, they are being reduced and not being collected as much. Salvation Army is not collecting textiles now from a lot of brink sites, and that's due to the fact that the textiles now, something they alluded to earlier on, just not the quality that used to be there. They're made out of a lot lesser quality material, and they're just a throwaway society.
Thanks. And I think on the textile thing, and again, perhaps it's something to put a marker down for a future bringing back to yourselves here at Scrutiny, and another discussion on. Again, put that within the context of which is a good thing. More people are reselling stuff anyway, and there's a much society is changing, thankfully, a lot more in terms of how people take responsibility for textiles. So again, perhaps that's more what we should be doing, encouraging that and encouraging reuse and resale. And maybe that's more of our role, rather than saying that we're going to try and find a way to collect it all. And one of the things when we discussed this, I remember discussing this 2 or 3 years ago about whether we revisit that discussion, and even if it was technically, the answer was still it's technically very difficult, we still had a bit of a moral problem about that. So, well, we shouldn't be competing with those charities and people that are collecting and reusing. So, and there was a danger if we did that, we'd end up sort of taking that off. So I think the time is right now, I think, to just look at it all again and come up with a good considered view. So I'd welcome that sort of focus on textiles as a particular thing to look at. Go on.
I'm really keen that we finish as absolutely close to one as possible. Dr. Adamosu was waiting, but then Councillor Barkey.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick point, and it was just to Councillor Hill's final point on the comm strategy. And it's really encouraging to hear the discussion around communication. In the community pride work, we've ring-fenced some funding that's really looking at communication, because we absolutely know that that's absolutely part of that behaviour change, as well as letting residents know what it is that we're doing. But just that point on like disinformation and students, we also know that social contract between the council and residents is broken, and sometimes if we come in front and start saying this is what we do, that's not necessarily believed. So in community pride, and I definitely think it'll extend to environmental services, we're absolutely exploring content creators, partnering with students and others, and actually having them speak on behalf of what we're doing, and that is absolutely what we're exploring. And it'll be really good to start thinking about that communication strategy for environmental services as well as community pride. But I really do think that content creators is our way forward as well.
So, Councillor Barker, I'm just going to keep you waiting one more time because Dr. Irving's coming in.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep this really, really brief. But just to say that the challenge that Councillor Hills has set out is not new. So actually, if you look historically, people have always doubted what happens to that material. My research started in the Second World War. You'd kind of think that people would be invested then, but they still didn't believe what was happening to the stuff. But it comes back to the point about trusted voices. Actually, if you've got people who that audience will listen to, they're much, much more likely to be taken with you.
Says Councillor Barker.
Right. Given that Christmas is probably the peak time when people chuck more stuff away, we also put something on the bins, you know, saying bin collection date such and such. Is it not possible to have a QR code that will actually give them information for all the year as well at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, what we do at council at Christmas time is we write to all households, and we continue to do that even though there's a cost. So everybody gets the household leaflets, I think you're referring to. So they get a leaflet telling them the new bin days. And what we've done consistently, and we've made sure it's a consistent message with pictures, and is exactly that. So people, you recall when you get that leaflet through every Christmas, it tells you new bin days, and there's a well, we think it's a handy to tear off sort of thing that you can stick on your beside your fridge or wherever you keep these things, put it in the drawer, never look at it again probably, unfortunately. A guide to what goes in the green bin, and we updated that obviously with glass in the last year or two, and there's a QR code on that in the links to Leeds Recycles and what you do, what goes in the green bin doesn't do. So we do that through that household leaflet every year, and it's something we think's worth continuing, because it does cost a bit of money to do, but it's worth doing. Whether that's complemented by other things is the question, how we complement those things, but yeah.
I think modern, I'm not that modern myself, but on these little stickers that you put on the bins, surely all the cue card, people just snap a cue card now and it's all there. You don't really need a leaflet anymore, really, because most people don't read them to them.
Well, I welcome your views on whether people read them or not, but I think we don't go around sticking stuff on bins per se. You know, it's not some. It's only usually you get something stuck on when you've done something you shouldn't. But again, I think that's one of the things I would put up as a challenge and an ask for yourselves, and around the connectivity with yourselves and community committees and wards is, let's work with you on that in the streets, the neighbours, the places, the people that you think actually that would have the greatest impact on, and let's design a sticker together and get people to go out and do it through the Neighbour Action Weeks. That's one of the things that they will be doing anyway, but that's very focused, and it'll just be 33 places within wards across the year. For the rest of the community, doesn't mean we can't do something together on that. So really welcome working with members on something bespoke to their area like that.
Brilliant. So we are just going to wrap up now. I just want to add some final the comments. I don't really need response. Just say, like, I think the bin stickers thing's really interesting at the moment. Bin, you know, when you get a sticker on a bin, it's because you've done something wrong, as you said. But I do think actually these bins are everywhere, and I think they are a canvas for us to put stuff on, to get information out, and maybe go paperless or somewhat less papery. I think lots of people on a regular basis ask to talk about nitrous oxide canisters, and it'd be worth. Presumably the council has already issued information, but it'd be good to get that information out, because Litter-Free Leeds and others are keen to know what to do with them. Just a note and a request really for you. It'd be really interesting to do some proactive work connecting with city centre blocks as well, because I still hear from city centre residents where they just have no recycling provision. It'd be interesting to know how much we can lean on property management companies to make sure that they're all. I don't know if the legislation is already there, but I'm keen that all residents get the opportunity to recycle if they can. I think there's definitely work to do. You talked about Christmas, and I thought you were talking about Headingley Christmas. So Headingley Christmas being when all the students go. It'd be really important, I think, to build dialogue now ahead of next year, so that we can smooth out some of the kinks between those wanting to step in and recycle as much of that stuff as possible. So hopefully that work is underway. And finally, but just because people ask all the time, can you put pizza boxes in green bins?
Ideally not, no. It's still got a lot of grease in there, so ideally not. And not only that, if there's pieces in there, it's, you know, we can't see exactly what's inside there. Then it's an environmental problem when we get audited by the year, because we've got food waste in the bale.
Thank you. Just to wrap up, we are just past 1. So thank you once again. We have noted the TEEP self-assessment around co-mingling, and we have noted the introduction of glass, of course, into recycling since August 24. And we really appreciate all your work, both kind of outside and inside the council, and look forward to more discussion about all the many things we've not had time to go into detail about it today. But once again, thank you to all of you for your feedback. The next meeting of this Scrutiny Board will take place at 10:30 a.m. on the 28th of September 2026. There's a private meeting for Scrutiny Board members at 10. The main meeting will start at 10:30, and then there is also the briefing about locality working online at the beginning of September. So have a lovely summer, enjoy the sunshine while it lasts, and keep up the good work. Thank you.